Chapter 1349. It was hard to imagine the almighty devil apologizing. Little Black felt that it was frightened. The intelligent system's ripples were a little shaky. Little Blackie. Suddenly, he was called. The car paused, pretending to be unresponsive. Chin-mo reached over and placed Bojio on the passenger seat. He held the steering wheel with one hand and arched a brow. "Are you intending for me to pour a bucket of water on your car?" Little Blackie couldn't pretend anymore. He turned on the lights immediately. Chin-mo's voice was calm. "Find the nearest hospital. Lock onto the hospital now, straight line distance." Before Little Blackie could finish his sentence, the Lamborghini sped towards the asphalt road like the wind. It was uncomfortable to have a fever. Especially the joints like the knee, it was especially sore. The fever spread from the inside out. She felt cold and hot all over. Bojio's consciousness wasn't clear. The Lamborghini didn't stop at a large hospital. It wasn't dark yet and there would definitely be a lot of people. It was a clean and large clinic in a small district. It looked high-end and the equipment was complete. But at this hour, it was either a child or an elderly person. It was rare to see someone carrying a person in. But probably because of Chin-mo's height, the person in his arms didn't seem sick. Instead, she seemed to be asleep, wrapped in his jacket. The medical staff couldn't help but glance over. After all, they might see handsome people occasionally, but this was the first time they saw someone with such an aura. He was cold and aloof, but he was very polite. But what was surprising was that ever since he entered, he hadn't put the person in his arms down. He even took the thermometer from the nurse and turned to take the youngster's temperature. 39 degrees, the fever is quite severe. The nurse glanced at the thermometer. "It's best to do a blood test to see if there's any inflammation." Chin-mo replied. He carried Bojio and walked to the window on the second floor. During the blood test, he had to give her an injection. But Bojio refused to extend her hand. Chin-mo looked at her furrowed brows, kissed her palm, and said, "Be good." That familiar voice probably had an effect. Bojio loosened her grip and the blood test was successful. The nurse took a look and said, "He needs an intravenous drip. The patient has a history of asthma. Is there any medicine for allergies?" "No," Chin-mo replied, not forgetting to place his hand on Bojio's forehead as though he knew it would make her feel better. When the nurse saw this scene, she really wanted to take a picture of it and send it to her boyfriend so that he could take a good look at it. When dealing with handsome people, the nurse's tone would definitely be very good. "Your bed number is 0271. Here is the doctor's prescription list. I'll go over after I'm done." Chin-mo thanked her. His back view was still so captivating that people couldn't help but stare. The medical staff all gathered together. "Who is this? You're not from this district, right? Why haven't I seen you before?" "I don't know. I think he's even more handsome than a celebrity. Too good-looking. It's a pity that he's already taken." It was not hard to hear the regret in his voice. Chin-mo acted as if he hadn't heard anything and walked into the ward. No matter how high-end a clinic was, it wouldn't have its own ward. There were 2 beds in one ward. The bed inside was already occupied. It was a little boy who was immersed in drinking yogurt. His mother was nowhere to be found. She was lying on the bed and receiving an intravenous drip. Chin-mo leaned over and placed the person in his arms on the other bed. Only then did the medical staff clearly see the face of the person he was holding. They were momentarily stunned. The face was so beautiful that it was hard to tell whether it was a man or a woman. Because of the fever, there was a faint flush on her cheeks. It was rare to see such a beautiful woman when she was sick. However, they could still see that she was extremely uncomfortable. Her thin lips were slightly dry and her hair was stuck to her forehead. Her brows were still furrowed. The nurse brought the medicine over for the intravenous drip. She didn't understand why such a beautiful person wouldn't cooperate with the needle. Chin Mo saw it and turned his body, allowing Bojio to lean into his arms. Then he lifted the person's right hand. "Be good, you'll recover." The nurse was amazed. It wasn't her imagination. It seemed that the sick woman would only lower her guard in front of her boyfriend. However, she had been in the clinic for a long time and rarely saw such a patient boyfriend. Honestly, this was the first time she had seen such a patient. The little boy, who was also suffering from the flu, had been watching from the side. Coincidentally, his mother came in. He sat up straight and leaned over. Mom, that big brother's coaxing tone is similar to yours." The little boy's mother felt that her spoiled child was hopeless. She knew that the man beside her must have heard it. She turned her head and was about to smile apologetically. The person in his arms seemed to be very uncomfortable. She wanted to move the hand that was holding the intravenous drip. However, he held her down. His tone was calm, but it wasn't hard to hear the gentleness in it. "Are you uncomfortable? Bear with it for a while more, the infusion will be over soon." The little boy saw this and shook his head. "No, it's not the same. If I moved, you would have beaten me up." As a mother, she didn't know what to say. She coughed lightly. "Drink your yogurt." The little boy sighed. It was the same fever, but why was there such a huge difference? At first, he thought that this was already sad enough. Unexpectedly, the handsome big brother peeled a piece of candy and fed it to the patient in his arms. The little boy raised his head. "Mom, I want to eat candy too." His mother, who was accompanying him, suddenly felt helpless. Were all the young people in love like this? They were even more meticulous than her own child. Why didn't she find someone like this? Fortunately, the little boy was almost done with the infusion. It was just a short half an hour. The mother and son suffered a blow that they had never experienced before. The little boy glanced over. "Mom, I'm not a troublemaker. My dad never treated you like this when you were sick. Your dad is a heartless." The mother paused and laughed. "So you have to be nicer to your girlfriend in the future. Be like this big brother, understand?" The little boy nodded. He didn't understand. Why was the older sister in the big brother's arms the one who was sick, but the big brother was the one with an ugly expression? The mother and son left. Only Chin Mo and Bojio were left in the ward. The person in his arms hadn't woken up yet. Chin Mo didn't change his position. He held the paper cup with one hand, the rim of the cup against her lips. This was the scene that Terry, who had been by Chin Mo's side, saw when he came in with the things. When he had picked up the call, he hadn't dared to believe that it was really Boss Chin calling him. After all, he had received news that Boss Chin wouldn't be appearing in the near future and that something had happened. After hanging up, his first reaction was to inform Madam and Boss. Then, he went to the location that Boss Chin had designated with a bag of candy in his hand. This was the reason why Boss Chin had called him. He knew young Master Joe. Oh wait, it wasn't young Master Joe but Miss Joe who loved candy. He didn't have to think to know that Boss Chin wanted to give these candy to Miss Joe. But even so, when he saw the scene, he couldn't help but pause. After all, Boss Chin had never served anyone like this before. He seemed to be exuding a cold aura, but when he looked at the person in his arms, his gaze was filled with adoration. "Boss Chin, let me do it." As a special assistant, he had to be quick. Unexpectedly, before he could reach for the paper cup, the person in front of him had already taken a sip and leaned over to pass it to the person in his arms. It was as though he didn't exist in the room. Honestly, was he just a sugar bearer? When he realized that he might become a third wheel, the smart assistant placed the candy down and didn't say anything else. He closed the door and stood there, waiting for Boss Chin to buy something for him before entering. As a young man who was still single, he really didn't want to eat Boss Chin's dog food. The sky outside gradually darkened. 2 hours later, Bojio wanted to pull the blanket off her body due to the heat but was pressed down by a hand. It was slightly cold and comfortable. There's still half a can left, we'll be done soon. That voice made Bojio realize that she wasn't dreaming and that the blurry vision she had had in the car was real. As well as the apology he had whispered into her ear. He was really back. Bojio opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the person's side profile. He was wearing a dark-colored sweater, his Adam's apple moving slightly under his long neck. His jawline was glowing. It was extremely familiar. Bojio reached out instinctively, grabbing onto his sleeve. This was something she had often done when she was young. Chin-mo paused and lowered his eyes to look at her. His long, curly lashes fell, and his eyes were deep. Seeing that she had woken up, he didn't stop. Instead, he hooked her face, leaned over, and passed the water over again. Bojio was indeed thirsty. Before she could react, she received the kiss. The sweet warm water touched her lips, the faint fragrance of the man's arrogance passing over. It was slightly cold and soft, like touching ice cream. It melted in his mouth and tasted sweet. This was the feeling she had every time she kissed the Almighty. It was an addictive feeling. It was a pity that he wasn't kissing her, he was feeding her water. He left after a touch. Bojio was disappointed. Just as she was about to use her seduction skills, he opened his palm, revealing a pile of sweets. Pick one. Orange flavored. Bojio pointed at one of the sweets. She watched as his slender and fair hand peeled it open and fed it to her. After savoring the taste, she glanced up. Chapter 1350. MMH, Bojio didn't mind expressing her thoughts. I want to eat meat. Eat meat? Chin-mo laughed, his eyes bright like aged wine. We'll talk about it when you're better. Bojio wanted to move. Chin-mo reached out and pressed her down, turning to make a phone call. Not long after, the special assistant walked in from the outside, holding a beautiful takeaway box in his hand. What was disappointing was that they were all porridge. Bojio had been a carnivore since she was young. Porridge didn't feel anything. But she was indeed hungry, so she didn't care if she felt anything. Bojio wanted to eat by herself. His assistant was watching from the side, but Boss Chin was one step ahead, opening the takeaway box. He held the spoon in his hand, looking at Miss Jo with an arched brow. Open your mouth. Bojio realized that good-looking people would be a feast for the eyes when they fed others. The porridge was still hot. When it reached her mouth, the saltiness was just right and the texture was good. Bojio tilted her head to drink. When she was done, the four-drip was finished. Before she could stand up, he bent over and pulled her into his arms. It's cold outside. These 3 words were spoken in a very faint voice. Bojio could smell the fragrance on his body. She didn't pay attention to anything else. The sound of his heartbeat was too clear. The corners of his mouth curled up as he exerted more strength with his fingers. Chin-mo glanced down at the person in his arms. Retract your face. MMH? Bojio didn't understand. His voice was still faint. You're too pretty, it's dazzling. When Chin-mo said this, assistantly turned sideways to open the door. He coughed softly and held back his laughter. When Boss Chin fell in love, it was really hard to describe. The sky outside was dark. It was winter in Jiang City and the temperature had dropped to 0 degrees. When the wind blew over, it was exceptionally cold. But Bojo didn't feel anything. She knew that he was blocking the wind for her. Because when they were about to enter the car, she heard his voice. Why is the temperature still a little high? The fever wouldn't subside so quickly. Even within 4 drip, it would take a night to recover. Chin Mo was an expert in psychology. He knew the basics of medicine. But for some reason, the moment he touched her warm body, he couldn't wait to lower the temperature. Bojo felt that this wasn't bad. In the past, she had been injured and sick. Come to think of it, he had only taken care of her like this when she was young. After that, she had become the young lord of the hacker world. There were many things that he had to face by himself. Even if he had a fever, he would be fine after a good night's sleep. How could it be like today, when there were people coaxing him? Bojo tilted her head and could see his neck. It was long and fair, giving off an aura of abstinence. Cold. He probably noticed her gaze. He lowered his eyes and kissed her eyes. We'll be there soon. Bojo felt a sweetness in her heart. Her head was still burning. She didn't know that Chin Mo was recalling his childhood memories. She just felt a sense of familiarity rising in her heart, but she couldn't put her finger on it. It was probably because he had taken good care of her. Moreover, the Almighty actually didn't bring up her dark history when he lost his memory. From this point of view, having a fever wasn't bad either. Perfect. In the end, she was still too naive. The Almighty's next sentence was, "When we arrive, I want to hear how I fell in love with you at first sight and how I pursued you." Chapter 1351. Just one sentence from the Almighty. Bojo felt as though she had been tricked again. She really couldn't have a dark history. Especially in front of the Almighty. Most importantly, this Almighty was her boyfriend. When they were about to alight, he reached out to pinch her face, his brows arched, giving off a gentle impression. "Do you think you can escape by pretending to be asleep?" Bojo opened her eyes, but before she could speak, he wrapped her up with his jacket. It would be perfect if the Almighty didn't dig up her dark history instead of taking care of her. They weren't heading back to the Chin family's house but to her apartment. Grandfather Butler's expression darkened when he saw his young lord being carried back. But as a gentleman, he poured a cup of English black tea for his assistant. The assistant was stunned when he saw the old man in front of him. When did the Fu family hire such a butler? He thought he had a good aura, wearing a suit every day and helping Boss Chin settle all matters. If he claimed to be the second best assistant, no one would dare to do so. But this person in front of him wasn't just wearing a suit. More importantly, his clothes were spotless. Even the way he looked at his pocket watch was perfect. From the tea set to the pastry in his mouth, it was so exquisite that it shocked him. Such a beautiful thing definitely wouldn't taste good. With this thought in mind, the assistant placed a piece of pastry into his mouth casually. As a young man, he had been fed dog food for an entire day. Shouldn't he eat something to fill his stomach? How could it taste so good? The assistant's eyes widened in that instant. Looking at Grandpa Butler, who had been extremely elegant from the beginning to the end, he suddenly felt like he had lost. No wonder Boss Chin didn't bring Mischio back. The assistant wasn't aware of the other reason. Chin Mo knew that with Grandfather Butler's medical skills, it would definitely be good for her. Bojo was lying on the bed, accepting the Almighty's water. She was about to do something to distract the Almighty. It was better not to talk about how he had wooed her. Perhaps it was because of her dark history or the slight fever. Bojo's face was slightly red. To show that she was obedient, she sat down as if she had done something to redeem herself. She drank whatever Chin Mo fed her. Even though she didn't like to drink water usually, she drank half a cup in one go. Then, she looked at the desert god as if she was asking for praise. The desert god did not react. Bojo drank another half cup before looking up. The result was the same. Looks like I can't escape. Bojo thought for a moment. If she didn't kiss and coax the Almighty, she would be able to get away with it. She didn't expect that before she could speak. He reached out and picked up a photo by the bedside. When he lowered his eyes, it was impossible to see any expression on his face. That picture had appeared in the castle before. Because of this photo, the cold aura emitted from the Almighty's body was still vivid in his mind. Instinctively, Bojo reached out and took the photo. She seemed to be muttering to herself and explaining, "Why is this photo here? It must be Grandpa Butler who did it." After saying that, he turned around, pulled out the drawer, and put the photo into it. Now that the Almighty had gotten rid of the hypnosis, he should be rather weak. She would tell him about the photo after he calmed down. As a domineering CEO, she had to be considerate. After Bojo put the photo away, she smiled at Chin Mo and leaned against him suavely. Chin Mo lowered his lids and looked at her casually. He fed her another mouthful of water. "It's not surprising that you did it. After all, she is your childhood sweetheart." Bojo drank the water nervously. After swallowing, she coughed lightly. "It really wasn't me." This time, the Almighty had indeed wronged her. She didn't have time to set up the photo. Ever since the hypnosis had been planted on the Almighty, Bojo had been thinking of ways to make him stay. Even though the Almighty had always called her Sugar Boy, Bojo could sense the playfulness behind it. It seemed as though he would leave once he lost interest. Of course, that was just her facade. But it was this facade. Bojo couldn't even coax little Princess Chin back then. Why would she take the photo out? Grandfather Butler was different. From a medical point of view, hypnosis would usually be related to memories that people weren't willing to face. Because they weren't willing to face it, it would create a psychological weakness and seal off certain things. Hence, Grandfather Butler would try any method to evoke Chin Mo's memory. Bojo understood this logic. But the Almighty's rejection of her, his childhood sweetheart, had been too obvious. Now that she had a dark history, she had to avoid these minefield topics. Chin Mo could read her thoughts. He lifted his thin lips and pulled the drawer open. "Why? Do you think I'll be jealous?" "Why would you?" Bojo laughed. "Aren't you going to eat it?" Chin Mo replied slowly, "What's there to eat?" Bojo. No matter how she thought about it, he didn't mean it. It was probably another trap. Bojo didn't want to fall for it. She wanted to create a topic to trap the Almighty. She pushed the drawer back. "Brother Mo, after what you said, I thought about it. I agree that my childhood sweetheart is a little scheming. For example, he never allowed me to play with others. Now that I think about it, he might have been jealous. I was young back then and didn't understand it all." After she was done, she waited for the Almighty to agree with her point of view. After all, according to the Almighty's personality, not only would he agree to it, he would also calmly advise her to stay away from such people and so on. But why was he so quiet? Bojo watched as he peeled off the packaging, his fingers pausing. She arched a brow. She was about to eat. Why did the Almighty suddenly stop? Before she could figure it out, Chin Mo sat down. Chin Mo sat down, his thin lips slightly curved as he asked her, "Do you want to eat?" The Almighty was tempting her with his beauty again. Bojo waited for him to feed her. Unexpectedly, the man smiled, raised his hand slightly, and threw the candy that was originally meant for her into the trash can beside him. "Bojo, since you're having a fever, eat less sweet things." Chin Mo arched a brow. He exuded an aura of abstinence. What he said sounded very reasonable. But he had fed her a lot of candy previously. Bojo didn't know how she had offended him. She sat there in confusion. He turned and covered her with the blanket. His voice was calm. I heard that the purest feelings happen when you're young. Bojo knew he was trying to knock her down. In the end, it was because of that photo. She replied immediately, what do you know when you were young? Chinemo tapped her wrist. You don't want to talk about your childhood. Bojo nodded. It was mainly because you would get jealous. Chinemo chuckled. His slender and fair hand was still tapping her wrist. He seemed to respect her opinion. He pondered over it slowly. The light landed on his chin. Let's talk about how many people you have chased and how I fell in love with you at first sight. Bojo, this wasn't even as good as the previous topic. Bojo wilted. She leaned her head against Chin-mo's chest, her gaze wavering. Brother Mo, my head hurts. Do you think I'll believe you? Chin-mo smirked. Bojo didn't reply. Even with the Almighty's words, he reached out to caress her head, his voice gentle and soothing. It was easy for her to relax. If it wasn't for another sentence. Aren't you going to bring the photo? Bojo would have remained motionless. I'm not doing it anymore. It looks good. Why aren't you doing it? Chin-mo was nonchalant. When he felt the warmth from her body, he peeled another piece of candy. It's good to reminisce about the past at the right time. Bojo didn't move. You said it so generously, I almost believed you. It's in the drawer. Bojo felt that this was a battle of wits and bravery. She didn't relax at all. It was time to give her the candy. Unexpectedly, he smiled again. The same thing happened. This time, he didn't throw the candy into the bin. Instead, he ate it himself. Bojo, was it so hard to eat candy nowadays? Besides, he had clearly been feeding it to her. Chin-mo swept her a glance, his voice calm. Do you want to eat it? Bojo replied. What if acting pitiful worked? Reality proved that acting pitiful wasn't a good thing in front of the Almighty. Chin-mo chuckled, pinching her face. Bear with it. Bojo, her awkwardness was definitely because of the photo. Bojo's mind was a little empty from the heat. She didn't think about recovering her memory. After all, Chin-mo didn't seem to have any intention of telling her. He wanted her to come back on her own. And when he found out that the scheming boy he was talking about was him, that feeling was really. Chin-mo lowered his lids, pinching her face again to see how long it would take for her to come back to her senses. Bojo didn't know why he was pinching her, but the warmth in his eyes was too strong. He treated her as though she was a treasure. His eyes were half-lidded, making him look abstinent and seductive. He specialized in attacking people's hearts. The only thing she couldn't do about was seduction. Her clear eyes would naturally stare straight at him. Chin-mo paused when he saw her. His gaze deepened and he bent down, intending to kiss the corner of her lips. Unexpectedly, he couldn't control himself. His fingers slid across her softness. He wanted to melt her into a puddle in his arms. Bojo felt dizzy from the kiss. Even a fever couldn't compare to the warmth the Almighty gave her. Even so, Chin-mo could feel her body temperature rising. His forehead was pressed against hers. Because of her lack of energy, her heart seemed to be tied into a knot. Her blood seemed to have stopped flowing. He hugged her and in the end, fed her a candy. He lowered his head and kissed her hair. Tell me when you're thirsty. Bojo didn't think the Almighty was good at taking care of people in the past. But this time, it was different. Actually, even though it was just a fever, it was quite troublesome. There was no taste in her mouth. She wanted to drink water and eat something sweet and sour at the same time. But it wasn't good to eat sweets all the time. Her throat couldn't take it. It wasn't easy to make a person with a fever comfortable. However, his eyes never left her. Whenever she moved, he would know what she was going to do. The candy was replaced by fruit, and he was the one who fed her the whole time. She didn't even need to go to the washroom. Bojio's hands were weak, but she didn't need the drip anymore. He didn't listen to her. He bent down and carried her into the washroom. He even helped her untie the belt of her pajamas. The back of the Almighty's hands was very white. His fingertips seemed to be glowing. It was a sign of his temperament. When he brushed past her, Bojio always felt that it was strange for his hands to untie her pants. But from this angle, he didn't seem to mind at all. "Call me when you're done." It was probably because he was taking care of her meticulously. Under the Almighty's supervision, Bojio drank many cups of water in one go. At around 10 p.m., Bojio's body temperature had returned to normal. Bojio's body temperature returned to normal. She closed her eyes and fell asleep in his arms. Unlike her, Chin Mo didn't sleep. He hugged her with one hand and used the other to check her temperature from time to time. A fever was most afraid of relapses in the night. Everyone knew that. Chin Mo didn't fall asleep immediately. His fingers caressed her cheeks and pushed the hair away. The gentleness in his eyes was bottomless. It seemed like it was about to spill out. But Bojio, who was already asleep, didn't see it. Otherwise, she would have felt that the look in his eyes was very familiar. Grandpa Butler stood outside the door. He had prepared the soup and wanted to come in, but when he saw this scene, he silently closed the door and looked at the silver pocket watch. He was clear that even without him, young Lord would recover very well today. Because the best medicine was meticulous care. In this aspect, no one could compare to the young master of the Chin family. Bojio slept comfortably. She couldn't help but rub her face against the warm cotton. She didn't know it wasn't a pillow but the sleeping shirt Chin Mo was wearing. The moment she moved, Chin Mo would open his eyes and look at her to check her temperature. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. He pinched her face. "I've given you so many hints but you still haven't guessed the answer. Little Bojio, it isn't wrong to call you an idiot." Bojio seemed to be dreaming of something good. Her lips were still half raised. Her mouth was slightly open and there was moisture coming out. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. He turned sideways and placed the photo back in its original position. The night sky was getting darker. The netizens weren't sure what was going on. Their focus was on the competition. After the match between Supreme Alliance and Theo, they saw hope. At the same time, they realized that Supreme Alliance wasn't as good as the Japanese. Chapter 1352. After the match between Supreme Alliance and Theo, they saw hope. At the same time, they realized that Supreme Alliance's standards weren't as good as the Japanese. Many analysis posts were published, the gist of which was that the chances of Supreme Alliance losing were too high. It wasn't because Supreme Alliance wasn't good, but because the Japanese were too capable. Putting Yusishin aside, Hoshino's skills were world-class. They weren't just members of the Japanese. They were chosen by the Japanese to represent them in the international competition every year. Moreover, Supreme Alliance's strength didn't only come from their individual skills, more importantly, it came from their own fan base. Any one of them could start a conversation. It wasn't just limited to China. A long time ago, Lin Chintao had mentioned that Hoshino was his idol. His influence was evident since he was the idol of professional gamers. Supreme Alliance versus the Japanese. In China, there wasn't much of a difference. But in the internationally sports scene, the name Supreme Alliance hadn't appeared in the past 3 years. The foreign media had flipped through Supreme Alliance's competition history. Such a team wasn't eye-catching. Except for the most valuable esports player. But it had been 3 years since Chin Mo had been sealed. From the foreign media's point of view, Supreme Alliance hadn't been outstanding for the past 3 years. Did that mean Chin Mo's strength had weakened? After all, in China, many esports players would start a live stream after becoming a professional esports player. The huge influx of fans seemed to have made them forget their original intentions. In the end, they could still do live streams, but not professional esports. It was simple, the money earned from a professional esport wasn't as fast as a live stream. Besides, the fans would sometimes have fantasies about them, sending countless girls to their doorsteps. Hence, in the eyes of the foreign media, Supreme Alliance was already in the same state. After all, the team's looks made people feel that they should be celebrities. Moreover, it was Chin Mo. Many people said that if you were ugly, people would subconsciously identify you. Similarly, handsome people could do it too. It was just that their positions were different. The greater the discussion, the greater the pressure on Supreme Alliance. On the other hand, since they were professionals, they had to bear this pressure. The internet cafe was still lit, but it wasn't open. Yin Wuyao had a cigarette in his mouth. Just as he was about to go to bed, he heard someone knocking on the door. He pulled the iron door open and saw 3 people standing in a row outside. Shui Yao Yao, Coco, and Feng Shang. Perhaps it was because it was almost the holidays, the atmosphere outside was especially strong. The atmosphere of Christmas was everywhere, and it was snowing. The 3 of them always looked very young when they wore their combat uniforms on the outside and cotton-padded clothes on the inside. But Yin Wuyao thought for a moment. These 3 weren't that old, the oldest was only 19 years old. Come in. Yin Wuyao was still holding a box of instant noodles in his hand. Now that he saw 3 more people, he turned around and asked, "Do you want to eat?" The 3 of them nodded and followed behind Yin Wuyao, like children following their parents. As Yin Wuyao cooked instant noodles with a cigarette in his mouth, he wondered if he had become a mother ahead of time. One of the benefits of internet cafes was the abundance of snacks. The 3 of them didn't train today. Other than Coco, their faces were now recognizable. Even when they walked over, they wore masks and were now sitting in the private room. The private room was huge. The 3 of them sat, hugging a huge pile of snacks and watching Slam Dunk. Unlike the National League, they didn't play like their lives depended on it. They didn't watch the Japanese's tactics. There were so many classic images of the Japanese, they could imagine it even with their eyes closed. If there was a god in every field, the Japanese were undoubtedly the god of esports. Logic told them that they should relax and face the competition the next day. But they couldn't sleep, tossing and turning. It seemed like there were times when one would have such a feeling. When you were an ordinary person, you wanted to live a little more. When you weren't ordinary anymore, you could walk on the streets and see people discussing the holidays as they pleased. But when you could only wear a mask and walk through the dazzling array of shops, you would always be envious of others. The loneliness in your heart didn't seem to have found peace. Even the uneasiness wasn't something anyone could understand. Because they could feel their standards dropping, they couldn't help but walk here. Coco had thought that he would be alone, but the moment he turned the corner, he saw little Stutterer tying his shoelaces and Yao Yao waving at them. They didn't plan to meet each other, it was just a chance encounter. It seemed like everyone was the same, only then could they feel at ease. They knew what they were afraid of. They were afraid that they would lose the competition when their captain wasn't around. They were afraid that they would drag the entire team down because of their poor positioning. They didn't need anyone to tell them, they were clear about these problems. They were even afraid of these things, worried about them. After all, Little Spade had been in a bad state after the competition. Even now, her phone hadn't been switched on. The discussions online continued. They couldn't satisfy everyone. Even if they were sick, there would still be people who would find fault with them. Yin Muyao had been in the industry for a long time. He knew what they were thinking when he came out with the noodles. He used his chopsticks to knock on the side of the pot. Bring the bowls. Why does the noodles feel a little hard? Coco was the first to eat. Feng Shang took a sip of the soup. There's something to eat, that's good enough. He accepted the explanation. Yin Muyao was a rough uncle. He usually boiled his noodles, but when he saw the three of them, he turned on the fire. He arched a brow and took a bite, realizing that it wasn't delicious yet. He stopped eating. He lit a cigarette and put it in his mouth, smiling faintly. I say, I'm an old man, I don't worry so much. You guys are so young, why are you thinking so much? Even if you lose, you will still have a chance in the future. Coco paused, not saying a word. Yin Muyao patted his shoulder. Don't give yourself too much pressure, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Don't worry about making mistakes, these things are normal in the competition. It wasn't clear if Yin Muyao's words were effective or if it was because of the hunger. It was easier to resist. After finishing the noodles, the three of them found their own beds and sofas, lying down and falling asleep. Yin Muyao glanced at it and brought 2 blankets over without batting an eyelid. One covered Coco and Feng Shang, while the other covered Shui Yao Yao. Then he turned his head, turning off the lights in the room. In the darkness, he didn't go to sleep. Instead, he turned his head and lit another cigarette. Then he took out his phone, sending Feng Yi a message. They're all asleep, they've thought it through now, but I don't know what will happen tomorrow. When Feng Yi saw the message, he raised his hand and loosened the collar of his shirt. He lifted his head and looked at the city lights outside the window. That's right, what should I do tomorrow? He wasn't the only one thinking about this. With both hands in his pockets, Lin Feng, who was wearing a long black down jacket, was also thinking about this question after walking 3 streets. He was probably so focused that he didn't even notice the glass door in front of him. With a loud bang, he crashed into it. Lin Feng said in pain, "Aw." The most awkward thing wasn't being seen by strangers. It was being seen by the people he was most familiar with. It was accompanied by light laughter from the girls. What else could Lin Feng do? He had an expression that said, I know you're laughing at me. Unfortunately, he was wearing a mask, the expression couldn't be conveyed. But when he glanced sideways, he met a pair of eyes. That person didn't ask if it was painful, raising his hand, brushing aside the hair in front of his forehead, his fingertips rubbing the reddened area. He didn't need to think to know that the other party must have seen the scene just now. What are you thinking about without looking at the road? Yunhu's voice was calm. Lin Feng coughed and avoided the topic. He also avoided his hand. Why are you here? Yunhu didn't intend to hide his tracks. I followed you all the way. When Lin Feng heard this, he felt a little uncomfortable. She heard him say, I've seen enough stupid things. Lin Feng opened his mouth, wanting to start a war. Let's find a place to talk. Yunhu looked serious. I'm under a lot of pressure. When Lin Feng heard this, his attitude changed instantly, placing his hand on Yunhu's shoulder. Come, tell me what's bothering you. Ever since he was young, he had always been troubled by a lot of things. Yunhu was someone else's child. Pressure. What a joke. He had never experienced it before. Moreover, he had never experienced any major setbacks, other than the ones they had experienced together. It was all because he was obvious. On the other hand, Yunhu really couldn't see anything. When Lin Feng was young, he wanted to be a caring brother, but he never had the chance because Yunhu was outstanding. There wasn't any pressure at all. Even during the few days before and after the college entrance examination, he still ran on time. It was as though nothing could affect him. Now, it was finally Yoonhoo's turn to need his guidance. It was a dream come true. Lin Feng walked to the side with Yoonhoo, pleased with himself. Yoonhoo glanced sideways at the hand on his shoulder. He smiled. This guy didn't seem to realize that there was a difference between a straight and a straight person. The two of them were at the largest commercial square in Jiang City. This square was originally very fashionable. In addition to the geographical location, there were many people even at night. There were balloon sellers, guitars and some young rollerblading kids. Perhaps it was because Yoonhoo's height was too eye-catching. Even though both of them were wearing masks, their tall and slender figures attracted many girls. Lin Feng didn't realize that the gazes were directed at them. He brought Yoonhoo to sit on the long bench in the square, looking at the pile of balloons not far away. What kind of pressure is it? Are you afraid you won't perform well tomorrow? Yoonhoo replied faintly, his long legs crossed. He didn't look like he was under pressure, as though he was just finding an excuse to stay with this person. The atmosphere was especially festive. They could vaguely hear the music from the coffee shop. It was Yi Sin Chen's voice, singing, "Christmas Knot." I completely understand what you're thinking. Lin Feng seemed to be very experienced, sighing deeply, starting to imitate Yoonhoo's posture. He sat like that, relaxed, but his hands were a little cold. But this didn't affect his interest in being a caring brother. As long as you wait for me. Yoonhoo spoke before he could. I'll go buy a cup of coffee. Lin Feng agreed with this point. Being a caring brother meant drinking coffee, that would make it seem more formal. There was a coffee shop nearby. It sold quickly. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that after Yoonhoo brought 2 cups of hot coffee out, Lin Feng sat on the long bench, watching the heat in his hands. When he reached out to take it, he heard a sentence from the side. Look at how good my boyfriend is, he's a guy, he knows it's cold, he's buying a cup of coffee, but you don't know how to buy it for me. Lin Feng, boyfriend, a guy, buying coffee for him, one could imagine what his expression was like. Yoonhoo was very natural. Help me. Oh. Lin Feng thought to himself, the girl who just walked over was definitely a fujoshi. A fujoshi would look at anyone, but this had nothing to do with him. Unexpectedly, before he could take the coffee, another voice floated over. How oppressive, it's fine if you wear couple outfits out, but you're actually sitting outside drinking coffee. Wearing couple outfits. Lin Feng tilted his head, glancing at the long black down jacket on Yoonhoo. Girl, down jackets for boys are all the same. Take a closer look, there is a difference. How can this be a couple outfit? Awkward. Even the naive Lin Feng felt awkward, it showed how many people were watching. He couldn't drink this coffee no matter what. After all, he had to remove his mask to drink coffee. If he and Yoonhoo removed their masks. By then, who knew what kind of topic it would bring? Hence, Lin Feng didn't think much, he stood up with the steaming hot coffee between them. Let's go, we'll talk when we get back. That was his original plan, but who knew that he might have stood up too abruptly, the cup of coffee in his hand slanted to the side, scalding him and throwing it out. Lin Feng wasn't the only one who didn't expect this. Even Yoonhoo hadn't expected it. There were coffee stains on his pants. Because he was usually too neat, he seemed slightly disheveled. From that angle, it seemed as though Lin Feng was worried about what others would think. He wanted to reject Yoonhoo's coffee but didn't know how to. A sense of alienation suddenly burst forth. Chapter 1353. Lin Feng sensed it too. He opened his mouth, wanting to explain. That, I'm not, Yoonhoo interrupted him as though he didn't care. I know. Lin Feng watched the back view in front of him. Do you want to wipe your pants first? I'll wash it when I get home. Yunhu held onto the coffee cup, his eyes half-lidded, seemingly nonchalant. Lin Feng felt that his brain wasn't working properly. He could indeed wash it when he got home. I'll call a cab. Lin Feng wanted to make it up to him, but he didn't expect that there wouldn't be any cabs nearby, probably due to the festival. The taxi queues in front of the commercial plaza were also in short supply. Yunhu stood there and could clearly see the steam rising from the coffee cup. He tilted his head to look at the person beside him who was still tapping on his phone. The snowflakes fell on his fingers, melting bit by bit. It was cold just looking at him. Yunhu paused, taking a step forward, passing the coffee cup in his hand over. It'll be quick, Lin Feng didn't understand. What did he mean? But this time, he held it firmly, not spilling it out. Yunhu took out his phone. I'll call a cab, hold the cup, it can warm your hands. It was too polite to thank him. Lin Feng could only take the cup, using the moment he removed his mask to secretly take a sip. Unexpectedly, there was another voice coming from the other side. Two people drinking from the same cup, it's an indirect kiss. Little Shou just doesn't seem to agree, but he actually likes it. How awkward, the cute Zero is. Lin Feng almost spat out his coffee. Cute. Zero. Him. F***ck, girl, take a closer look at my face. Even if I'm gay, I should be a 1. Okay. Lin Feng told himself to calm down. Removing his mask would definitely expose his identity. Yunhu swept him a glance. What's wrong? Nothing. Sometimes, Lin Feng envied people with poor hearing. Yunhu kept his phone, his long fingers moving. There's no car, let's go another round. Sure, let's go. Lin Feng didn't know that there wasn't a car up there, but Yunhu didn't call for them, hoping that they could stay like this for a while longer. After all, it was a festival. It was a festival that only couples would celebrate together. Lin Feng didn't think much of it. After all, it would be better if he didn't sit on the bench. Moreover, he wouldn't be able to sleep if he went home now. This time, compared to before, it was much more ordinary. There was music floating in the square, and many people were taking pictures with peach hearts that were emitting light. During such festivals, the square would always have many shaped lights. Just looking at it made people feel like they were full of young girls. Lin Feng didn't really understand what a girl's heart was. However, seeing so many girls taking photos, for a straight man like him, it was also a beautiful scenery. If it wasn't for Yunhu's sudden question, do you care a lot about people calling you Zero? Nonsense, I'm just. Lin Feng paused for a moment. So this guy had heard him. Yunhu stuffed his hands into his pockets. It's not your problem. Anyone who is with me will be the one down there. Lin Feng chuckled. Brother, your ability to boast has improved a lot. Yunhu leaned forward. Isn't it? Lin Feng looked at the pair of eyes that were suddenly so close to him. For some reason, his heart tightened. He tilted his head. You can talk if you want, but you're so close. You're scaring me. Even this can scare you. Yunhu straightened and spoke slowly. When did you become so timid? Or are you worried about other people's words? You should indeed maintain a distance from me in the future. Let's go, the car is here. When Lin Feng heard that, he felt that he couldn't explain himself. Very quickly, Yunhu raised his arm and placed it on his shoulder. He hugged his neck like a good brother. I'm joking. Let's go, the car is really here. Just like that, Lin Feng allowed Yunhu to mess around. He didn't have the mood to think about how to win against the Japanese tomorrow. His mind was filled with thoughts. Was there really something wrong with his way of doing things? Did he make Yunhu think that he would mind his sexual orientation? Hence, when Lin Feng reached home, he kept trying to make himself look warmer. Yunhu saw it in his eyes. To deal with this guy, he had to be harsh with his words. He threw the pants into the washing machine. When he turned, he could see his face. Yunhu originally thought that after today's incident, he would definitely stay and sleep with him to show that he was still close to him. Who knew that it would be different from before? When he saw him walk out, he placed the cup in his hand down. It's getting late. Sleep early. You don't have to be so stressed. You played so well, I should be the one feeling stressed. Alright, I'm going to sleep. Lin Feng stretched as he spoke. See you tomorrow. You. Yunhu almost blurted out. Were you sleeping here? When he saw Lin Feng looking at him in confusion, he changed his tone. Remember to pick up everything. Don't forget the wrist guard. I know. Lin Feng waved his hand as he walked out. When the door closed, Yunhu could still hear his mother's voice. Yunhu could vaguely hear his mother's voice. Isn't little Feng sleeping here today? No, it's not convenient. Tomorrow, the voice at the back couldn't be heard clearly. It was probably because he had reached the entrance. Yunhu looked at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window. He wore the same down jacket. Even passers-by noticed it. In his eyes, it was just an imagination. This guy's nerves were getting thicker and thicker. But there were still changes. They were very subtle. So subtle that he didn't want to think about it. It wasn't convenient for him to stay the night. What exactly was he thinking? Yunhu leaned his head against the window. Outside, the lights were bright and dazzling. It seemed that with that person around, the pressure would be greatly reduced. The Japanese were indeed too strong. They were so strong that he was worried that that person would return to his state after the competition. Even if it wasn't his fault, he would habitually look for the reason on himself. That thick-skinned person wasn't slow at all in certain aspects. Time trickled by slowly. The sky started to brighten from the east. In the largest building in Jiang City, the staff had already started to enter the arena. Their busy schedule showed how much importance the country and abroad placed on the finals. An hour later, the foreign media translator arrived. His aura was strong and attracted many people's attention. The Chinese side had been guessing what could have attracted so many foreign media from so many places. They wanted to interview them. The media was good with their words. Of course, they wouldn't express that they didn't care about Supreme Alliance. They just smiled. Everyone knows the Japanese's ability. Their competition will definitely be exciting. I believe the others are here for the same reason. It sounded tactful, but upon closer inspection, it couldn't be more direct. They hadn't mentioned Supreme Alliance throughout. They would only speak when asked. Supreme Alliance, I haven't seen their competition, but since they are representing China, they should be great. It was a perfunctory response from adults. It was obvious from their expressions that they hadn't even heard of Supreme Alliance. Of course, some of the media had done some research before, but that was all. There weren't many who were interested in Supreme Alliance. When they were asked, "Which team do you think will win?" they laughed. I think the answer is obvious. Anyone who can compete with Hoshino and Yucixin will learn a lot from this competition. Perhaps Supreme Alliance is strong, but these two international players are hard to surpass. With them, the Japanese will definitely win. The words weren't pleasant to hear. But it was undeniable that they were objective. Hoshino and Yucixin, these two names were sought after by many esports fans regardless of their nationality. They were idols for many people. Hence, it would be difficult for Supreme Alliance to win. After all, the competition between Xiangnan and the Japanese was still fresh in their minds. That year, Yu Cixin hadn't even participated in the Asian Cup. Just Hoshino alone was enough to defeat the Xiangnan team. During the National League, Supreme Alliance and Xiangnan had been evenly matched. It had been difficult for them to even win. With such a comparison, the difference was obvious. Moreover, Supreme Alliance was lacking Qin Mo. The netizens were also complaining. It seemed like some people were indeed like that. Whenever there was a domestic competition with an overseas team, they would always feel that the overseas team was better. There were also some who didn't know anything and started scolding. For example, "Don't come to our competition if you are so capable." Some even said, "If Supreme Alliance doesn't win, it will be a disgrace to the Chinese." It was easy to say, but these people didn't seem to consider that no one had the responsibility to win. Fortunately, all the players had disconnected from the internet. When she picked up her phone, it wasn't because she didn't want to look but because she knew it would only worsen her mood. Indeed, there were many supporters. There were many heartwarming words too. But with the competition ahead, there was a formless pressure. Hence, even though she had been burning for an entire night, there was still a string called time hanging in her heart. She opened her eyes before it was 8 p.m. Once she realized where she was, she glanced up and saw the handsome face inches away from her. It was probably because he had to take care of her last night that he didn't even take off his jacket. His black trench coat was half open, and the fur around the collar was stuck to the pillow. Her face was right on his chest, and she could see the sunlight shining on the bridge of his nose. Perhaps because the halo was too strong, even his eyelashes were a shade darker than before. Like a crow's wings, they cast a soft shadow on his elegant and handsome face, making him look especially clean. Bojo wanted to get up, but the moment she moved, he woke up. Chapter 1354. Perhaps because the halo was too strong, even his eyelashes were a shade darker than before. Like a crow's wings, they cast a soft shadow on his elegant and handsome face, making him look especially clean. Bojo wanted to get up, but the moment she moved, he woke up. He frowned slightly. The Almighty had always been in a bad mood when he woke up, but he didn't seem to be in a bad mood today. Instead, he grabbed her wrist with one hand and pulled her closer to him, pressing his forehead against hers. His long eyelashes were right in front of him, measuring her body temperature in the most primitive way. Satisfied, he relaxed his brows, his voice still carrying the laziness of a person who had just woken up. "You're recovering well." When he said this, his breath landed on her face, even the tip of their noses touching. His heart inexplicably skipped a beat. She wanted to kiss him, but he didn't let her. He arched a brow, avoiding her. Trying to do something naughty again. "A good morning kiss." Bojo replied innocently. Qin Mo smiled. "I don't need it." Bojo. Was dating the Almighty so unromantic? Indeed, it wasn't romantic at all. The moment she opened her eyes, he brought her a cup of medicine. Bojo didn't like medicine, so she poured half of it. The awkward thing was that the Almighty, who had just finished washing up, caught her in the act. "Seems like you have a problem with the medicine I brewed for you," Qin Mo said nonchalantly. "There's a competition later and after drinking the medicine, you'll feel sleepy." Bojo replied righteously. "I'll feel sleepy when I have a fever," Qin Mo replied, tapping the bottom of her cup with his finger. The Almighty had this aura. If you didn't listen to him, it would seem like you were being unreasonable. Bojo tilted her head up and finished the rest of the cup. The root wasn't bitter, but she couldn't stand the taste. She wanted to rinse her mouth. The moment she placed the cup down, he leaned over and kissed the corner of her lips. It wasn't an expected kiss. Bojo's hand stilled as he smiled. Not bad, you're a good girl. That was. Little Bojio lifted her thin lips after being praised. She couldn't suppress her happiness. However, for some reason, there was an indescribable sense of familiarity. Even as she brushed her teeth, she couldn't help but feel confused. Because they were going to the competition, their clothes were very simple. The black and white uniform wasn't complicated, but when Bojio wore it, there was an indescribable tension. Today, she was not wearing a dress. Because everything that needed to be proven had already been proven. He looked like a handsome young man who had walked out of a manga. The black diamond earring on his left ear was sparkling. When she walked out, she saw that person standing in front of the dressing mirror, tilting his head to tidy up his sleeves. His slender and fair fingers were beautiful. It was as if just this action alone could remind her of the way he played games. Time and time again, he amazed everyone and created impossible records again and again. The Almighty's skin was really good. The white porcelain always gave people a cold feeling that was difficult to approach. Abstinence's aura had never weakened since he put on the battle uniform. Behind him, the word Supreme Alliance floated. It was just like the first time they met, when he stood at the highest point. That was right. Bojio told herself. Chapter 1355. At 10 in the morning, before the ticketing started, there was already a huge crowd at the venue. The atmosphere at the venue could be described as a boiling cauldron of voices. There weren't just domestic fans, there were also some who flew over from other places just to watch the Asian Cup. The media held their topics and cameras, interviewing everywhere. The scene was so lively that even security personnel were deployed. The subway entrance at that station had been blocked to the point where not even a drop of water could trickle through. Everyone had an indescribable excitement on their faces. The organizers had even invited famous cosplayers and CVs in the industry. Everyone had seen cosplayers cosplaying Almighties before. But it was the first time the fans had seen Almighties dubbing in the game. The benefits of the Asian Cup finals were simply too good to be true. Regardless of whether it was a girl or a boy, they would stick the logo of the team they supported on their faces. The temperature in Jiang City wasn't low, but it didn't affect the enthusiasm of the people. Shui Yaoyao watched the scene on the television, reaching out to stuff the milk that Coco had given her into her backpack. Yin Wuyao had prepared the milk. In his eyes, the three of them were all children. He had spoken to Feng Yi on the phone yesterday. At 10:30, the commercial car of Supreme Alliance arrived on time. Feng Yi was sitting in the front passenger seat. The first thing he asked was, "Have you eaten?" "Why yes, Uncle's girlfriend made it." Feng Shang held the milk bag in his mouth, looking refreshed. Feng Yi turned back, arching a brow at Yin Wuyao. Yin Wuyao replied calmly, "Fan." A fan who chased him to the internet cafe. Coco held the milk bag in his mouth. "She's quite cute and good at cooking, but I feel like she only likes Uncle. I'm so handsome but she hasn't seen me before." Feng Yi smiled. "Did you give her a ticket?" Since he had given the team a meal, he had to at least give her a ticket. Yin Wuyao replied, "She doesn't understand the game." A fan who doesn't understand the game. Feng Yi wasn't trying to dig deeper, he was just trying to lighten the mood before the competition. Shui Yaoyao spoke up. She said she's a fan of Uncle's looks. Yes. That's why I can't accept it. Coco pointed to himself. Look at my face and then at Uncle, I should be the one chosen. Feng Shang stammered, That's your self-perception. There's a problem. Feng Yi relaxed a little as he listened to the bickering in the car. At least everyone was in a good state. That was more important than anything else. At 12:30 p.m., the tickets were officially checked in. The length of the queue was astonishing. Tickets could be checked on both floors, but even so, the staff were so busy that they didn't even have time to drink water. After entering, they took their seats according to their seat numbers. In order to avoid chaos, the ticketing area had already been divided according to the ticket numbers. 1,000,000 people were present at the same time. It was an unprecedented grand occasion. The crew was not in position yet. However, this did not affect the live broadcast of some media on the platform. Anything that happened at the scene could become a hot topic on a certain blog. The esports channel of a certain live streaming app even did a big follow-up report. The host was a streamer with a huge following. The competition is about to start. The Asian Cup is held every year, but this year's competition is especially popular. Almighty C, have you guessed the reason? Firstly, this year's Asian Cup is being held in our country. Many esports fans in our country are looking forward to it. After all, in the past, they had to travel to other countries to watch competitions, and even the itinerary was inconvenient. Now that the Asian Cup is being held at home, the feeling and attention will definitely be different. Many of my friends from my hometown have asked me to help them find 2 tickets. Those who have played Hero would more or less want to see the almighties that they have admired over the years. This is inseparable from their emotions. Moreover, the team representing China this year isn't Xiangnan, but Supreme Alliance. The strength of this team will leave a deeper impression. As an old man who has retired from esports, if it wasn't for my work arrangements, I would really like to go and take a look. Ah! The host seemed to have noticed something, his finger pointing at the screen. Speaking of Xiangnan, they seem to be there as well. That's normal since the competition is worth watching. The host asked, from what Almighty C said, you seem to have a good opinion of Supreme Alliance. I'm not sure if you saw the interview this morning, but someone said that it would be extremely difficult for Supreme Alliance to win this competition. Indeed, it will be difficult. Hence, Supreme Alliance will need to go all out. If not, they might be suppressed by the Japanese. Oh. Why do you say that? Is it because Qin Mo isn't around? The host was interested to hear the analysis from the audience. You'll understand when you watch the competition. Facing the Japanese is a very stressful task. The strength of the Japanese lies in the fact that every one of their players is outstanding. Even their trainees are comparable to some of our professional players. I'm not saying this to belittle our country or anything. Everyone knows the current situation. In terms of esports, they seem to have a natural advantage. With Yu Cixin and Hoshino blocking their path, no team can think calmly against them. Any strategy will be useless against the Japanese. Everyone who plays games knows how strong Hoshino's prediction skills are. Even though he isn't the captain of the Japanese, he is hailed as the god of prediction. Yu Cixin doesn't need to be mentioned, he is able to accurately predict a person's movements and habits after watching them play once. Only in an esports competition will you be able to see how terrifying he is. The host was taken aback. Almighty C, are you saying that even if Qin Mo is here, the chances of Supreme Alliance losing are high? No, that's not what I meant. It depends on how Supreme Alliance adjusts their mental state. They are facing the gods in the eyes of many professional esports players. More or less, some people entered the industry because of their competition videos. Both Hoshino and Yu Cixin would have a mental breakdown if they met the two of them. Next, let's talk about Qin Mo. It's still uncertain if he's participating since we didn't see him in the previous match. From the news online, he should have lost his memory. Even if he's here, he won't be as good as he used to be. That's the most worrying thing. Almighty C's analysis seems to be the case. The host paused before shouting in delight, they are here. Supreme Alliance's car is here. Everyone turned towards the screen when they heard her voice. An expensive commercial car drove in. Everyone knew Supreme Alliance wasn't lacking in money, Hence, the players were equipped with the best equipment in the industry, including the team car. When they saw the car driving in, the media surrounded it. Feng Yi was the first to come down. He was still dressed in a suit, a smile on his face. He raised his hands and stopped the media. One by one, the members of the team jumped out of the car and were escorted into the elevator by the security personnel. Even though they were separated by a screen, it was as if they could feel the tense and fiery atmosphere. The host shook his head in pity. As everyone can see, this is indeed Supreme Alliance's car. Almighty Qin isn't in the team. I'm afraid it's just as Almighty C said. Supreme Alliance will likely be suppressed by the Japanese in this match. Qin Mo didn't appear, which made the fans' hearts rise again. In reality, the most listless ones were the team members. Lin Feng was usually a chatterbox, but today, he didn't say a word. He had a down jacket over his uniform and his hat was buttoned up. Honestly, he wasn't pretending to be deep, but there were too many people. It was quieter and the atmosphere wasn't right. But at this stage, Feng Yi didn't know what to say. Young Master Coco knew everyone had their own thoughts. Hence, even though he was depressed, he didn't show it. However, it was still different from before. From the entrance to the lounge, no one spoke a word during the long journey. Feng Yi knew that if he tried to stir up the atmosphere, they would definitely cooperate. But their hearts were heavy. This was similar to the year when they lost the competition and lost the chance to advance. No one wanted to speak. They were filled with sadness, disappointment, indignation, self-blame, and a series of other emotions. Perhaps it was too quiet, so Lin Feng asked, "Which lounge are we in?" "The one in front," Feng Yi replied. "Oh." Lin Feng replied. He was the first to reach it, removing his jacket as he pushed the door open. However, when Lin Feng pushed open the door, he was stunned. Even his movements froze. He wasn't hallucinating, right? Captain. Lin Feng started to suspect that he was hallucinating. But Chongqing stood there with his sleeves rolled up. He was wearing a battle uniform, but he gave off an aura of abstinence. The only one who could wear a large uniform was the captain. "Why are you standing at the entrance?" As Coco spoke, he tried to push him away. Unexpectedly, after he pushed him away, he successfully became dumbfounded. But Coco wasn't the type to let his imagination run wild. He shouted for Captain while pouncing towards Qin Mo. Bojio reached out to push him away, a smile on her face. "Coco, even if you are a guy, please maintain a suitable distance from my boyfriend. Don't pounce on him so easily." Of course, she was the only one who could pounce on the Almighty. After Coco was pushed away, he wasn't upset. Instead, he smiled happily, showing his 2 canine teeth. "I knew Little Spade was the best. You are handsome and reliable. Bringing Captain back is a small matter, how could it be difficult for you? It's good that you understand. You don't have to say it out loud even though I like it." This was the reply of someone who had never known humility. Shui Yao Yao and Yin Wuyao, who were still standing at the entrance, couldn't help but laugh. Rao Rong's eyes lit up. He turned towards Qin Mo. Even if he had lost his memory, he should be the one to end the match. Lin Feng paused for a moment before bursting into laughter. His first reaction was to hug Little Spade's neck and caress her head. Of course. This idea, he was just thinking about it. Because just as he raised his hand, preparing to place it on Little Spade's shoulder, the captain's emotionless gaze landed on his face, giving off a strong sense of oppression. Lin Feng's scalp went numb. He immediately retracted his hand. "Just pretend that nothing had happened. It's good that you're here." Feng Yi walked in. At this moment, the smile on his face was real. He had already prepared himself for Little Spade's absence. Unexpectedly, Little Spade wasn't the only one who came. Even young Master Qin was back. At this moment, the rock in Feng Yi's heart finally fell. After all these years, all he owed was a match like this. Because there were other people in the team, he had to consider them every time. They were supposed to be famous in international competitions, but because of the team itself, they couldn't compete at a bigger venue. If they were really implicated, in reality, it was Supreme Alliance that implicated Qin Mo. They weren't like Xiangnan, they didn't have a lot of reserve strength to use. In fact, they didn't even have the right conditions. If he had gone to Xiangnan, his godlike operation would have been known to the world. Supreme Alliance was too new and they couldn't find good players. As a result, there weren't many people who could match up with Qin Mo. He was the MVP in every match, be it against the wind or with the wind. But in the end, Supreme Alliance didn't even have the qualifications to leave the fortress. This was the portrayal of Supreme Alliance in the past. As for those with the highest points, because their teams didn't advance, they all disappeared. Even so, when all the big teams came to poach him, he didn't leave. From an assassin who came and went without a trace, he became a team control who stood under the tower. These were all sacrifices he made for Supreme Alliance. Fortunately, it was different this year. Once again, Feng Yi was thankful for Little Spade's existence. She didn't just find young Master Qin, but also the game, perhaps others couldn't tell. He knew the sacrifices Qin Mo made and understood the best. After Little Spade appeared, he was really happy when he played the game again. Because he didn't have to worry about anything, he could use the character he was best at to compete. It was just like the first time he met him. Feng Yi believed that even without his memories, he could still amaze the audience. Lin Feng didn't think too much, he just wanted to ask one thing. Little Spade, are you okay? He left in that state yesterday and couldn't be contacted. Of course he was worried. He hadn't expected to be fed dog food. My body. I'm fine. I had a fever last night and Brother Mo took care of me the whole night, using his forehead to test my temperature. I don't think you can enjoy such gentleness. Chapter 1356. F***CK. Why did he have to ask such a question? Lin Fang's lips twitched. He didn't feel like speaking anymore. It had been because of his sadness previously, but now, it was because of his pain. In the future, she would capture all the people who flaunted their affection in the game and confiscate their assets. Bo Jiu didn't think so. When she had been in the military, she hadn't even had anyone to flaunt their affection for. Now that she finally had someone, she had to talk to her best friend, Lin Feng. Lin Feng asked, "Wait a minute, what did you say I was?" "Best friend." "What?" Bo Jiu arched a brow. Lin Feng's face was fierce. "I'm a man and you want me to be your best friend. Yao Yao is your best friend. Go talk to Yao Yao." "It's not the same." Bo Jiu replied slowly, "It's fun to talk to you. Doesn't your Zero like it?" Another critical hit after the previous night. Zero. Him. F***CK. Is there a Zero like me? Little Spade, tell me, are you looking for a fight? That had been the Supreme Alliance's state in the past. But Lin Feng realized that a certain someone's skin was getting thicker by the day. How dare she call him a Zero, that was intolerable. "Come, let's fight." Bo Jiu smiled, reaching out to pull him over. Her face was devilishly handsome. "Anyway, I have the Almighty to help me. You can find someone to help you if you can." Lin Feng choked, grabbing his hair. "After all this, you still want to flaunt your affection. Why should I fall for your tricks?" "Why?" He didn't expect his captain to care about little Spade anymore. From the look in his eyes, it was clear that he approved of it. Moreover, his captain didn't remember them. Seriously, Lin Feng sat down, asking his teammates, "Can you guys tolerate it?" "Little flower Lin." Coco caressed his chin, his gaze deep. "I feel that being abused has something to do with one's face. Why don't you do it? I'll help you adjust and perhaps you might be able to escape the fate of being abused." Lin Feng didn't reply. Basically, he had lost all hope in life, giving him a whatever expression. Coco waved the pen in his hand, a mischievous glint in his eyes. As he drew, he said, "My fan gave me this, the effect is really good." "Really?" "It's true." F***CK, Coco, what did you draw for me?" "One, didn't you emphasize that you are one?" Lin Feng wanted to wipe it off, but he realized that it really couldn't be wiped off. Yunhu reached out to stop him. "It looks good." The person in the mirror had a 1 drawn on the side of his face, at the corner of his eyes, making him look much younger. The atmosphere in the lounge was so relaxed that no matter what they were going to face next, they had nothing to fear. Rao Rong stood at the side, watching the scene with a slight smile. Suddenly, Lin Chintao's voice rang out. "It's great that Supreme Alliance has such an atmosphere." Rao Rong tilted his head, looking at the person who was muttering to himself. He reached out and placed his hand on his naturally curled hair. "You are now a member of Supreme Alliance." Hearing this, Lin Chintao paused for a moment before smiling brightly. "Yeah, me too." The members of the pro teams knew that other than Xiangnan, the atmosphere before the match wouldn't be like this. In the past, the investors would shove people into the team in order to raise their popularity. They could have won the competition, but because of this, they would be exhausted. Supreme Alliance was different. It felt as though their dreams weren't just dreams anymore. He wanted to prove himself in the profession he loved. At the very least, he wanted his parents to know. He wasn't any worse than those who worked. His profession could also be respected by others. Perhaps, he could understand why Almighty Yin had joined this team after his retirement. Because here, he had found the drive he had when he had first entered the industry. He wanted to wear the national flag with his teammates and stand on the champion seat. That day had finally come. There wasn't a single person present who didn't think so. In the past year, they had been chased after, liked, spread rumors, tarnished beyond recognition, becoming a memory etched in many people's minds. Their abilities would be revealed in today's competition. Perhaps because the atmosphere was too harmonious, Qin Mo didn't seem to have any intentions of mentioning it. Hence, apart from Bojiu, no one in the team knew that Qin Mo had recovered his memory, much less the shoutcasters. 1:45 p.m. There were 15 minutes left before the competition officially started. At the scene, every staff member in charge of broadcasting was checking the equipment in their hands in order to avoid any problems during the live broadcast. The three hosts, 2 men and 1 woman, stood on the stage, facing the script. Time trickled by. Therefore, the esports fans who came to watch the competition were already seated. The audience outside had been cleared. 10 minutes ago, the ticketing could no longer be checked. The atmosphere was unimaginable. 1:55 p.m. The various online gaming channels were flooded with red. After the stage control and director checked their watches, they gestured to the backstage. Voices rang out from the resting rooms of both teams. Although the language was different, the meaning was similar. He reminded all the teams that there were less than 5 minutes left before the start of the match, and asked all the teams to get into position. When the voice rang out, Lin Feng was still pointing at the number 1 on his face, asking Yunhu if he should attack. After hearing this broadcast, everyone's expression changed in an instant. It was replaced with unprecedented seriousness. That's right, seriousness. Even Feng Xiang seemed to have grown up, his features clear and distinct. Yin Wuliao paused in the act of lighting his cigarette. Rao Rong put on the wrist guard on his right hand. Bojiu stuffed a hand into her pocket, the corners of her lips curved upwards, clearly showing off. Just like her most commonly used hero, the devilish handsomeness that swept away everything. Qi Nemo reached out to close the cabinet, turning around. His voice was calm, but it seemed to be able to shake the entire venue. "Are you ready?" Lin Fang's eyes were filled with shock. It was too familiar. This was the question their captain would ask them every time they went on stage. But that wasn't the end. He held onto his uniform with one hand, the other reaching out, his palm clenched into a fist. His gaze was deep, as though it could reflect everything that had happened over the years. The first time he had represented Supreme Alliance in battle. He had come this far from being a newbie. The year he had lost, he had leaned against the wall, not saying a word. Did he remember all of that? Lin Fang's eyes reddened, stretching his hand out. It was impossible for the others not to understand something that even he understood. Everyone clenched their fists together. Supreme Alliance. Chapter 1357. Swoosh. The screen opened. The director signaled for the last time. The three presenters glanced towards the camera. 1:58 p.m. The final countdown to the online video. Words streaked across the screen, words written by countless fans for Supreme Alliance. Some said that this group of people had all the craziness of their youth. The black coffee they had shared with their brothers. The instant noodles they had eaten together. The unforgettable first love. Even more so, the best appearance of our youth. 2018 Esports Asian Cup. There was a loud bang. Flames surged. The appearance of the presenter signified the start of the competition. "Hello everyone, we meet again. I believe everyone is anxious, we are just like you, not knowing what kind of exciting competition we will be watching. Let me reiterate, this is the finals of the 2018 Esports Asian Cup. Don't change the channel, the players you want to see will be appearing soon. Come, let's start the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 1, 0. Let's welcome the first team, the Japanese." Swoosh. All the lights were focused on a single point. At the large entrance on the left, those people seemed to have walked out from the halo. It wasn't baseless to say that the Japanese were strong. Just like their aura, it was as if they were formed by nature. Yu Cixin still had long, silky black hair, but it didn't seem feminine. Instead, after he wore the tailored uniform, there was a sharpness that couldn't be ignored, just like the smile hanging on his lips. His dark aura was thick, it wasn't something to be trifled with. Hoshino stood beside him. It was obvious he was different today, his black hair tied up with a hairband, his brows like the first snow of winter, revealing his original aura. The doll-faced man stood behind, the entire lineup drawn out. Even though it wasn't their home game. The cheers for Hoshino and Yu Cixin didn't diminish. Some even stood up in agitation. It was purely out of love. On the screens, the information of every member of the Japanese team was displayed. It was enough to make the blood boil. It was because of this that people wanted to see Supreme Alliance come out. The fans clutched the support sticks in their hands so tightly they couldn't even imagine it. In that group of people, there was an auntie who didn't seem to understand what esports was. She was dressed very beautifully today, just like when she had appeared in court for her daughter. However, at that time, the light in her eyes was almost extinguished. The injustices. Who could really empathize with her? When she was in so much pain that she even wanted to end her own life, some people were still asking her to talk about her morals. She got through the darkness that she thought she would never get out of. Rather than saying that he had gained power. Or rather, when she saw the child, she felt that there was still light. Now she was sitting here, watching that group of people compete. His heart was warm, and so were his eyes. There were some things that she did not understand. But she understood those emotions. The young lady beside her held onto her hand and pointed. "Auntie, a big spade will be coming out from that place in a while. I wonder what she will be wearing today and if she will be wearing a dress. She wore a dress yesterday, commanding the entire battle. Her godly predictions emptied my blood. If she wears a dress today, the guys sitting next to us will definitely go crazy." "Me too. I brought a Polaroid so I could take a photo of her for my friends. Regardless of what she wears, I like it." As the young lady spoke, she would laugh with her friends. Previously, they had been worried that she wouldn't understand, which was why they had sat on either side of her. Even when they had entered the stadium, they had helped her, even pointing at their own fan attire. "We are all Spade fans, we are a family." Who was the one that said that the more darkness one experienced, the more warmth one would understand? They had never met before, but because of their mutual love for the same person, they would protect her wherever they went. "Auntie, Auntie, sit here." The young ladies would even tidy up the rubbish and place it in a bag. Those small actions were enough to see through a person's heart. It seemed like all the ladies that liked that child were like that. With that thought, she smiled. That should be the case, after all, they were that child's fans. "All right, almighties from the Japanese, we are done with the introductions. Now, let's welcome our second team, Supreme Alliance." The moment the two words, Supreme Alliance, came out, countless people felt as if their hearts were being squeezed, and all their gazes were looking in the same direction. At the place where the lights were concentrated, figures could be vaguely seen walking out. All of them stood with their backs to the light, their shadows long and slender. It was probably because of the strong lighting, which made it difficult to see their faces clearly. When they slowly approached and formed a line, some people suddenly froze in place. Their eyes widened, tearing up. Some of them even reached out to cover their mouths in agitation. It was all because of the tall and straight figure at the front. The wind blew against his uniform, causing it to flap loudly. He lifted his brows slightly, and all the light seemed to rush into his eyes, dazzling to the extreme. "Boss! Almighty Chin! I knew you would come back. We are all waiting for you." It wasn't known who shouted first, but with a loud swoosh, a few boys unfurled the banner in their hands, their eyes red and filled with passion. In reality, they really didn't have any hope. Even though they were indignant, he hadn't even appeared in the previous match. So many people were scolding him. They were scolding him for not being able to handle the pressure as an almighty. But they forgot that they were the ones who didn't allow him to participate. After yesterday, many of them weren't feeling good. Especially the fans of the official team. They had been waiting under his official Weibo, watching his past posts and videos that had dominated the headlines countless times. They reposted silently, hoping that he would come back. After all, Supreme Alliance without Chin Mo. How could it be the real Supreme Alliance? Don't forget who had created it. It could be said that no one had the right to decide Supreme Alliance's direction. Only he had. Because of him, Supreme Alliance had been remembered by countless people that year. And because of him, Supreme Alliance hadn't been eliminated until this day. Many teams had disbanded because their members were old and had lost their value. But Supreme Alliance didn't. It was because of that person who balanced these things. Perhaps only the fans who had followed him all the way would understand. Asking a natural-born assassin to retract his edge and play a gentle team control. How much sacrifice was required? He wasn't like what the outside world said, unable to withstand the pressure. Chapter 1358. Qin Mo's appearance was an unexpected surprise. The number of views on the live stream reached its peak in a second. It wasn't just the fans who hadn't expected this. Even the reporters were caught off guard. They had no choice but to change their thoughts and turn their cameras to Supreme Alliance. Logically speaking, Feng Yi, who was good at public relations, would have given them the news beforehand. But this time, not to mention news, not even the slightest rumor was released. Hence, the people in the industry were guessing that something must have happened to Qin Mo and he wouldn't be able to participate. They hadn't expected him to appear just like that. After a moment of shock, the main director gestured to the backstage. The effect of the spotlight was magnified by 1-fold. 8 screens, every single one of them showing Supreme Alliance's appearance. Behind Qin Mo stood a total of 10 players, each face familiar to everyone. Feng Shang, Coco, Lin Chentao, Rao Rong, Yin Wuyao, Lin Feng, Yunhu, Shui Yaoyao, and the youngster with silver hair. She looked like she was appearing in an esports arena for the first time, so clean and warm that it made every girl's heart race. Even though they knew her gender, the moment they saw her in the black and white uniform, with one hand in her pocket and the curve of her chin stretched, they still felt defeated. There seemed to be a faint smile on her face. The chandelier illuminated her silhouette clearly, even her pale lips seemed to glow. Whoosh! Her name appeared on the big screen, Spade Z. There was almost no need for anyone to introduce her to them. Information about her already appeared in their minds. The first Kill King of Area C had entered the enemy's camp alone. Wherever he went, not even a blade of grass grew. This was the complete Supreme Alliance. Obviously, the host's reaction was stunned. Hence, after Supreme Alliance sat down, she said, "It's so exciting, I didn't expect Almighty Qin to appear at this time. I believe the finals will be exciting. I believe the audience is just like me, we can't wait any longer. Now, may we invite all the teams to announce the lineup for the first single match." Instantly, cries of support rang out from all directions. It was as if everyone was shouting out all their enthusiasm, and even their eyes were filled with light. When Yu Cixin, who was sitting at the back of the Japanese, saw this scene, he leaned back lazily and smiled. "What's wrong? Our invincible vice-captain, do you have any good ideas to deal with Qin Mo?" "There is one." Hoshino glanced over and moved his hair aside. "Let me interact with Seymour. He'll be jealous." Yu Cixin narrowed his eyes. "It's a good idea but I don't like it. Leave Qin Mo to me, what do you think?" "How long have you been waiting for this match?" Hoshino asked in return. Yu Cixin laughed. "Will I wait for the competition? Haven't you been watching Qin Mo's video from back then?" Hoshino asked slowly. "Those who don't know might think you have feelings for him." Yu Cixin stilled, straightening his back, his eyes dimming. "Do you think my prediction is more accurate or his?" "I see." Hoshino put on his wristband. "We will be fighting as a team, you and I will be fighting as a team." Yu Cixin's smile deepened. "That's what I meant." The other members of the Japanese felt a chill at the back of their neck, wondering why their captain and vice-captain were so serious today. They were actually going to fight as a team. One had to know that the vice-captain was best at solo fights. There was a legend in the esports industry that if they met the Japanese, they could just give up on the single combat. Because with Hoshino's ability, no one would be able to surpass him. What was the point of changing to a team battle? The dull-faced youth was young and curious. Watanabe caressed his chin. Supreme Alliance will probably send their important members into the team battle, which means, before he could finish his analysis, the Japanese team's individual player appeared on the screen. 2 words, Watanabe. Watanabe's face appeared in front of everyone. He arched a brow. The host added, "All right, the Japanese have pressed the confirmation button. Let's take a look at Supreme Alliance's player. North of the Yin Mountain." The two of them stood up at the same time. Watanabe's lips lifted. "Since that's the case, let me test the waters." With that, he walked up the stage, sat in front of the computer, and wore the black earpiece hanging at the side, not forgetting to glance at his fans. The shoutcasters asked, "It's rare to see such an appearance." "Indeed." The other shoutcaster added, "Honestly, I have watched many of the Japanese's competitions over the years. Under normal circumstances, Hoshino would definitely be the first to participate in such a large-scale competition. It was the same for the match against Xiangnan last year. Why is it different this year? They probably have some ulterior motives." "Probably." The shoutcasters couldn't make sense of it either. On the other hand, there were people online who were asking why the Japanese had chosen such an appearance. Look at today's competition logically. Everyone knows that Qin Mo's memory loss is set in stone and his skills have deteriorated due to the memory loss. The Japanese have always respected their opponents, but if the opponent is too weak, honestly speaking, Almighty Hoshino wouldn't have come out. There are two considerations, one is to test the waters of Supreme Alliance and the other is to groom new singles players. As someone who used to play sports and have participated in competitions, this is my opinion. If you don't like it, don't scold me. This statement was supported by some people. For a moment, it really did sound like that was the case. The passers-by shook their heads. Is that Supreme Alliance? If they had known, they would have sent Xiangnan. Last year, Almighty Hoshino was the first to participate. I don't think it's wise to make guesses, let's just watch the competition quietly. What else? I don't understand why they are still participating after losing their memory. Are they that stubborn? Look at the Japanese's attitude, they are a disgrace to the Chinese. Don't mock those who are fighting at the front lines. I don't understand their arguments, they are the ones fighting for the country, not you. Chapter 1359. Fortunately, this was a competition. The advantage of a professional competition was that once they entered the arena, they wouldn't be able to hear anything. Yin Wuyao also put on his earphones. Today, he rarely smoked before the start of the competition. Everyone's gazes changed slightly from the moment he sat in the room. His face was more undisciplined than anyone else's. But when he held on to the mouse, the tilt of his face caused everyone to be attracted to his fingers. Strangely, at his age, his hands should be rough. But Yin Wuyao wasn't. His hands were long and slender. It was all about his passion for esports. He had fantasized about returning one day, which was why he protected his hands subconsciously. Because he still needed them to touch the mouse and keyboard. The game's sound effect started to play. It was accompanied by the host's agitated commentary. The competition officially started. But regardless of whether it was the fans or the members of Supreme Alliance, Yin Wuyao's rising and falling hands were all in their line of sight. Watanabe isn't easy to deal with. The shoutcasters voiced their opinions during the battle. Indeed, his positioning and playing style are perfect and he is fast. With such an intense attack, he won't be able to block it if he doesn't show his true abilities. At this point, the commentator paused for a moment. Although this is only the early stages, we all know that the higher the level of a 1v1, the shorter the time it takes. A single thought can determine the winner and loser. If this situation continues, north of Yin Mountain will be in danger. As though to prove the shoutcaster's words, Watanabe used a second skill, striking Yin Wuyao. Deceleration, dizziness, and a slash during the assault. The speed was so fast that everyone who was watching this scene was stunned. It's really hard to imagine that there's such a fast speed. The shoutcaster's voice deepened. This is probably the strength of a world-class team. Every single one of them isn't an ordinary person. There aren't many people in the country who can stop him. Someone asked if it was that exaggerated. Could it be that Supreme Alliance wasn't doing well, causing the standard of their teammates to drop? In reality, they didn't know how strong they were. The only one who knew was the Xiangnan team sitting in the corner of the audience seats. Luo. MH. Do you still remember Watanabe? How could there not be? In the double match, the two of us tried to stop him. We did manage to stop him, but we lost 2 lives. It was a 2-for-1. Although you and I won that double match, in reality, we lost in terms of technique. Yeah, there were minions there and they helped us push away the opponent's crystal. Now Yin Wuyao is fighting this guy alone. No matter how I think about it, it's a little strenuous. It was indeed so. You would only be able to understand the strength of the Japanese when you really faced them. Wasn't it just a second skill? Why did Yin Wuyao look so weak? In fact, this second skill added a lot of positioning and prediction into it. The smoother the movements, the easier it was for people to overlook the details. In a high-level professional match, nothing was as simple as everyone thought it would be. If this continues, Uncle won't be able to get up in the later stages. Although Goddess Luo was a girl, she was best at analyzing the situation. Watanabe's strategy is obviously to test the waters for the Japanese. Uncle has to think of a way to make the other party reveal his true strength. Only then can we say that we have a chance of winning this duel. After all, you and I both know that when he fought with Watanabe, his abilities weren't just this. Before Goddess Luo could finish her sentence, Xiao Jing's voice rang out. He crossed his arms, his dark eyes focused on the screen. It's coming. What's coming? Before anyone could react, Yi Qin had already taken action. Watanabe suddenly launched his second wave of attacks. The defense tower was still there, it was completely unexpected. It was another second skill. Just as everyone thought Yin Wuyao was oblivious and was doomed. His right hand moved swiftly, leaving the opponent's area of control. The tower's damage landed on Watanabe's body. But that wasn't the end. Watanabe moved his mouse, wanting to use his positioning to take the first HP. Unexpectedly, in the blink of an eye, that person moved his mouse handsomely, his fingers moving up and down on the keyboard as he spun around and stabbed Watanabe. Beautiful. The shoutcaster couldn't help but exclaim. Watanabe's intelligence moved. He wanted to redirect the damage onto his opponent. Yin Wuyao wasn't a pushover either. He moved like a snake to avoid the damage, the audience's jaws dropped. But Watanabe didn't let go of this chance. And he really managed to hit his opponent. In a flash, he dashed forward again. Yin Wuyao backhanded him. The two of them hit each other at the same time. KO. The music started. Everyone saw these 2 words appear on the screen. North of Yin Wuyao fell backwards in a pool of blood. Even though many fans couldn't accept what they were seeing. But it was indeed the drop of blood that Yin Wuyao had given away. According to international practice. In a 1v1 PK, whoever could get the first drop of blood would be the victor. The fans didn't expect it to end so quickly. The defense tower hadn't even fallen. Why was it gone? This was the middle stage, the match hadn't even started for 20 minutes. How did it end just like that? Just as the audience sat in front of their computers, feeling that Supreme Alliance wasn't worth watching anymore and was about to give up on the competition. All of a sudden, another sound effect played. It was Watanabe. He was lying in a pool of blood too, but he was a step slower than Yin Wuyao. Watanabe hadn't expected this. Even his hand, which was holding the mouse, paused. It was in his calculations. After killing someone, he could ensure that he wouldn't die when he left the tower. Even if the other party retaliated, it would be within his control. Watanabe narrowed his eyes, glancing up at the slow-motion replay. That was when he realized that the other party wasn't just retaliating, he was also moving skillfully. He had obviously sensed his second attack and was planning to retaliate. If it wasn't for the fact that his opponent had slowed down during the turn just now, he might have been the first to be killed. Watanabe's lips twitched, as though he was saying, "Interesting." It was indeed interesting. He hadn't seen such an opponent in a long time. Even in such a situation, he was still able to bring him along. Everyone's eyes widened, and even the shoutcasters felt that it was a pity at that moment. But a competition was a competition and rules were rules. Yin Wuya was the first to fall and the first HP belonged to Watanabe. Hence, even though both parties had eliminated each other. Chapter 1360. Yin Wuya removed his earpiece and walked down. He seemed to be in a low mood. Bojiu tiptoed, standing up with her long legs. "I'll find some time to play again online." The meaning behind his words was clear. If the 1v1 match took longer, or if the format of the match was different, the final outcome would be a variable. Yin Wuya chuckled. "Don't comfort me, I know my hand speed was a little slow. It is indeed related to age." Bojiu smiled. "You're bullying the newbie with your slow hand speed." Yin Wuya paused, his smile deepening. "All right, little captain, you've comforted me. There were some things that were better said out loud. The next match will be the doubles." Yin Wuya glanced up at the screen. "Why do you think Hoshino isn't participating in the solo match?" Lin Feng leaned over. "Yes, I'm curious about that as well. The Japanese aren't an arrogant team. I'm afraid that if I lose now, I won't be able to force out their true abilities." Yin Wuyao's worry wasn't unreasonable. Bojiu smiled faintly. "That won't happen." "What won't happen?" Lin Feng didn't understand. Bojiu glanced at the calm Japanese and smiled. "It won't be impossible to force them to use their full strength. Do you think they won't give it their all with the Almighty and me here? We're the strongest couple." Lin Feng asked, "Are you going to show off this? Little black suit, you're really crazy now." Bojiu wasn't ashamed. Instead, she was proud. "With a boyfriend like the Almighty, you will want to show off too." Lin Feng, for some reason, he couldn't refute her. "All right, I'll be serious." Bojiu broke into a smile. "About why Hoshino doesn't want to fight solo?" Lin Feng asked, "Why?" Bojiu smiled. "Because of me, he wants to fight me during the team match." Lin Feng was helpless. "I'm asking you seriously." "I'm answering you seriously too." Bojiu stuffed a hand into her pocket, her smile still intact. Lin Feng's mouth twitched. "Who do you think will believe you? Experts are always lonely, as long as you know it." Bojiu turned to grab a bottle of mineral water. "I can only blame myself for being too low profile." Lin Feng tilted his head and looked at Coco, who was waiting for an answer. "I really want to beat her up." "Team Flower, calm down, don't be rash. Even if Little Spade is more manly and handsome than you, she is still a girl. Also, the captain has been looking at you since just now. Really, you won't have an easy time fighting." Coco's last sentence made Lin Feng's back stiffen. He slowly turned his stiff neck around. The person standing behind him was none other than their captain. Lin Feng took a deep breath and didn't wait for him to speak. "It seems like we have to find some time to discuss your relationship with Hoshino, Student Spadesy." Even the intelligent Bojiu hadn't expected the fire to spread to her. She coughed lightly. Seeing this, Lin Feng's expression instantly changed. That's right. We have to have a good talk. Qin Mo glanced over at him. Also, student Lin Feng, don't bully my girlfriend. You have been with me for so long, you should know that I'm not a reasonable person. Lin Feng, who exactly was the bully? You should get someone else to say that you're not reasonable, Captain. Besides, it wasn't a merit, why did you say it so casually? Wasn't there supposed to be no love in esports, only brotherhood? The captain who only doted on them had changed. The old saying was right, men were fickle. But why exactly did the Japanese set up such a setup? The shoutcasters were guessing as well. Actually, Bojio had already given the answer, but Lin Feng hadn't been bothered. Supreme Alliance's situation isn't looking good. They didn't win the single match and this will affect the competition greatly. Normally, the shoutcasters would analyze the situation from the actual situation. Perhaps that is indeed the case. What situation? When facing someone much stronger than you, humans tend to avoid it and it's hard to turn the tables. Speaking of which, Supreme Alliance hasn't decided on the duo this time. Because they aren't sure who is the safest choice. Actually, there is a pair that will definitely win if they fight now. Who? Qin Mo and Spade Z. But they can't be sent out now, I understand what you're saying. Since they lost the single match, they have to win the double match. That's how much pressure they will be under. That's right, this is an important match for the Japanese. Hence, they will give it their all. Even if Hoshino and Yusishin aren't participating, don't forget the other strong members in the Japanese team. Their win rate for the double match has always been above 90%. If they lose, Supreme Alliance won't have another chance. Hence, it will be a problem for Supreme Alliance to choose their members. After all, Qin Mo hasn't regained his memory and Feng Yi has been the one to send out. In such a situation, there are only two choices. Either Lin Feng and Yun Hu or Rao Rong and Lin Chuntao. In the entire Supreme Alliance, only the four of them are suitable for the double match. Supreme Alliance is starting to choose. As expected, Lin Chuntao and Rao Rong, double match. As an outsider, Feng Yi's ability to make such arrangements is impressive. But there's one thing he neglected. What is it? After all, these two joined Supreme Alliance later. Wouldn't it be safer to send Lin Feng and Yunhu here? You have to know that a team is more reliable when it comes to teamwork. Of course, this is just my opinion. But judging from the atmosphere in Supreme Alliance, it might be different. The shoutcasters were logical. The audience was the only ones that weren't logical. But there was one situation that was right. Regardless of the competition, the final outcome would be determined. After Yin Weiyao lost the first match, people started to say that Supreme Alliance wasn't good enough. They couldn't even force the Japanese to fight with all their might. How could they hope to win? In reality, Xiangnan, who was the clearest, had the right to speak. Yin Weiyao is a scary person. Indeed. Zhao Sanpang caressed his chin. But his hand speed is a little slow. If it was in the past, Watanabe would have died. Yin Weiyao is probably the only one who doesn't have to worry about his hand speed to stop me from going forward. Goddess Luo laughed. You wouldn't dare to go forward against Qin Mo. Oh right, there's also my goddess Little Spade. You don't have the dignity of a tank in front of her. My goddess is still the most handsome person in the world, I really want to be a CP with her. Wake up. Zhao Sanpang lifted his Mithraea chin. Look, your goddess is sitting beside Qin Mo, her arm resting on the chair as though he is her man. Speaking of which, Supreme Alliance is being fed dog food every day, it's really pitiful. But ever since they entered the arena, Qin Mo hasn't participated in any battles. Will he be fine in the team battle? Goddess Luo smiled brightly. Almighty Fatty, have you forgotten how we were wiped out by him back then? That's enough, don't talk about that. Zhao Sanpang was serious, obviously not wanting to reminisce about that competition. Goddess Luo remembered it clearly. The three of us wiped out the entire team, leaving only Qin Mo at the Beast King's side. We thought the three of us would be able to take him away, but we knew he wasn't there to fight the Beast King. Instead, he was there to use his big move to stun the three of us with the Beast King. Then, he would use his skill to teleport and jump out of the wall. After killing you, he was left with half his HP. We thought he would die, but who knew that he would jump back to the Beast King's side. With the blood-sucking knife, he used his big move to recover his HP and created the 3000 knife cutting that shocked the entire esports world. Until now, many people have tried to recreate that scene, but all of them have failed. But that was Qin Mo's peak. I know you can't forget that scene. Ever since Qin Mo's hand was injured, he hasn't been able to produce such results. Besides, he has lost his memory. I want Supreme Alliance to win just like you, but we have to consider the situation. It isn't just Supreme Alliance, even our combat ability is declining. Luo, even though I don't want to admit it, we are indeed old. Goddess Luo's fingers paused when she heard Zhao Sanpang's words. Just as she was about to speak, a voice came from the side. Is Luo old? She's already in her 4th year, how can she not be old? The young flower is only 18 or 19 years old. Zhao Sanpang didn't realize his big truth at all. His captain frowned. Are you comparing Luo to those people? Her hand speed is average, her positioning is average, and even her face is fake. What is there to compare? That's right. Goddess Luo smiled, her beautiful fingers supporting her chin as she looked at the person on her left. That was when Zhao Sanpang realized that the emotions in her eyes weren't simple. It couldn't be. He had never expected that such a competition would allow him to see things that he had never thought about before. After all, Luo loved to see new male idols. Everyone thought that she liked those with tender faces. Of course, there were also guesses that she couldn't get over the competition that year and would definitely be interested in Qin Mo. No matter which guess it was. There were people online who said that they wanted to form a Xiao Luo CP, but it wasn't popular. Luo didn't seem to like their captain. But now, it seemed a little dangerous. Just as Zhao Sanpang was still immersed in his own shock, Luo's eyes lit up. The double match had already started. Lin Chintao hadn't expected him to appear. He paused for a moment when he was putting on his earphones. He seemed to have noticed his nervousness. Rao Rong tilted his head and held the mouse with one hand. His lips were calm. Are you worried? Lin Chintao didn't deny it. He really felt like he couldn't breathe. Rao Rong looked at him, his other hand reaching over to help him adjust his earphones. I'm here, what are you worried about? Didn't you say that as long as I'm the team control, you would be able to compete without worry? Or do you not believe in my skills? Lin Chintao didn't need to look to see the face in front of him. He had waited for a year for this person to come back. A year in such a team. Even when this person came back, all his talent seemed to have been covered by a layer of dust. He had even imagined being able to participate in the Asian Cup. Even if he wasn't satisfied, he was already considering retirement. If he hadn't found him and said, "Follow me, let's compete again," he might have packed his things and returned to his hometown. His hometown was a small county town that no one knew the name of. It was impossible for the people there to accept his profession. He didn't have a platform. No matter how many fans he had, he wouldn't be able to do a large-scale live stream after he retired. It seemed to be the same in every industry. It was rare for someone to be able to come out. Other than competitions, it was more about survival. But for some reason, he didn't want to appear in front of his fans with that image. He wanted to start a live stream and earn some tips. If he was still in the team, it wasn't a big deal. But after he retired, he felt that something was wrong. Actually, no matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't hide his truest thoughts. Everyone had a dream of being a hero, regardless of gender. They wanted to stand at the most dazzling place and bring glory to the country. If that person was still by his side then, he would probably have no regrets in this life. Some people would say it out loud when they liked someone. He wouldn't because he had chosen to follow that person when he was around. You've calmed down. Rao Rong arched a brow. Lin Chintao nodded. Rao Rong chuckled, taking out his phone. You're quite slow-witted. Before the competition, I have a present for you. Present? Lin Chintao was confused. Rao Rong brought up the text, showing him the screen. Uncle said he doesn't know how to send WeChat messages, so he can't send you a voice message. Lin Chintao's eyes widened in shock. When his gaze landed on the page, his eyes turned red. People from his parents' generation probably didn't know how to express themselves. But because of that, it seemed more real. There were 3 messages. I heard about it from your friend. Your mom and I don't know how to operate a computer, so we got our neighbor, Xiao Lin, to set it up. We'll get your auntie and the rest to watch your competition. Actually, we've watched your competitions in the past, but we didn't tell you about it. Son, do your best. Regardless of whether you win or lose, remember to come home after the competition. Lin Chintao gulped, turning his face away. After so many years, was he finally acknowledged by his father? My dad has a bad temper, Lin Chintao said hoarsely. Lin Chintao said in a hoarse voice, back then, I insisted on competing and he told me not to go back for the rest of my life. Now. Chapter 1361. It was Supreme Alliance's double. It wasn't any team's double. Perhaps there had been too many times when he could only stare out the window in the dead of the night. He had once felt that this was the world. But this moment, it wasn't. Every single person in this arena. They had never seen the true darkness. Rao Rong was the only one who had thought he would never be able to climb back up. How much he loved his profession. How much he hated it. How he wasn't respected. How he could trample on them if he liked them. What was he fighting for? This was the question Rao Rong had asked himself the most after his father's death. Now, he had found it. With a click of the mouse, the game entered and the characters were selected. Be it Supreme Alliance or the Japanese, they typed quickly. Before the shoutcaster could get a chance to explain, the 2 teams had already dashed out of the spring. Usually, a double would consist of a long-range attacker and tank support, or a team control in the middle and a jungler. From the looks of the formation, Supreme Alliance and the Japanese seemed to have the same style. The shoutcaster continued, they are all junglers, it seems like both sides are trying to end this double as soon as possible. The Japanese are trying to follow up on their victory, such a combination is suitable for the current tempo. Now, it depends on who is faster. That's right, we can see from the big screen that both assassins are farming beasts in their respective jungles. From the looks of it, the Japanese are faster. The moment the shoutcaster finished his sentence, the assassin from the Japanese went to the bushes at the bottom lane and sent out a signal to gather. He was obviously preparing for something. But what was he going to do? Just when people were still puzzled, Bojio tightened her grip on the mineral water in the resting area. As an assassin, she was well prepared. She knew what he was going to do. He was waiting for the red buff to catch him. She watched as Lin Chintao approached on the map. 10 seconds later, the rest of them finally reacted to the situation. Everyone's eyes were wide open. Zhao Sanpeng's jaw dropped. F***CK, who can dodge that? The shoutcaster isn't wrong, this match is focused on the early stages. From the looks of the lineup, it won't drag to the later stages. That means that if anyone isn't developed in the early stages, they will be useless in the later stages. The opponent has made up their mind to destroy Supreme Alliance's jungler, which is why they are using such a strategy. Honestly, if you and I were to go up, we wouldn't be able to escape unscathed. It is too targeted and purposeful, but no one has noticed it. They were separated at the start, but now, they are together. This is the scariest. Goddess Luo's voice sank. Lin Chintao is indeed in danger. Everyone outside the arena was worried. Lin Chintao did not notice the danger around him as he flew past the wild zone. Everyone watched as he leaped up and hit the red buff. He was fast, and his positioning was beautiful. His right hand clicked on the mouse, and his left hand's slender fingers moved up and down on the keyboard. If it wasn't for the people lying in ambush around here. No matter how you looked at it, his playing style was outstanding. But at this moment, every time people looked at him, they would worry for him. The two players from the Japanese were already stirring in the bushes, waiting for his HP to drop to half. It was the best time for them to pounce. Lin Chintao seemed oblivious, continuing to use the red buff. They're here. Zhao Sanpeng, who was watching the match from God's perspective, clenched his fists. On the big screen, the two people who were originally hiding in the bushes suddenly moved. First, it was a freeze control, freezing Lin Chintao on the spot. The next second, the assassin leaped forward, his big move landing on Lin Chintao. In that instant, Lin Chintao was left with a sliver of HP. Just as the Japanese were about to take the first blood, no one noticed the sudden appearance of a figure on the screen. It was Rao Rong. He made use of his teleportation ability to move. First, it was a 3 consecutive stun. The other team control in the middle lane lost 2/3 of his HP. The next moment, he activated his big move. The two Japanese who were about to circle around were sucked in between them, causing them to lose their ability to move. Right at this moment, Lin Chintao, who was about to take the chance to return to the city, turned around and used his big move. In an instant, a sound effect flashed across the screen. KO. The first blood. Of course, that was after he killed the assassin. He wouldn't be able to escape. However, it was precisely because he had dealt with the enemy assassin that he had charged in. Rao Rong was able to kill the sorcerer from the Japanese in the next second. 1 for 2. No one had expected such an outcome. The Japanese had assumed they would take the first blood. But they had been seen through. How was that possible? Some of the audience found it unbelievable. Even the Japanese team was shocked at that moment. There was a saying in the Japanese, never use the same strategy. This meant that all their strategies were executed on the spot. In other words, even if Supreme Alliance had seen their videos, they wouldn't be able to figure out their strategy. The Japanese duo, who had never made a mistake in this aspect, narrowed their eyes. Yu Cixin chuckled. We seem to have been countered, what should we do? Hoshino glanced at the screen, replying, that's normal. The dull-faced youth was confused. How was that normal? After all, when the two seniors of Japan teamed up to fight, it was never an exaggeration. He had to get to the bottom of it. Vice Captain, how is that normal? Hoshino yawned, straightening his collar. Because they neglected Rao Rong. It's best not to ambush him. Do you think he's just a mid-lane sorcerer since he's one of the leaders of the Chinese team alongside Qin Mo? Since he's the best team control in China, his judgment is definitely extraordinary. Vice Captain, what do you mean? He already knew the position of the seniors. Why didn't he inform his jungler? Hoshino chuckled. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. It's a simple proverb. But that doesn't seem right. Isn't he afraid that if his jungler had hesitated a little, things would have? Before the doll-faced youth could finish, he seemed to have understood something. Does his jungler trust him that much? Hoshino's gaze was calm. Rather than trust, it's more like familiarity. You can predict what the other party is going to do from his position. A double fight is called a double fight because of the high level of chemistry between the two players. Rao Rong is a rare team control, and similarly, Supreme Alliance's jungler is also a huge contribution. He appeared as bait and then as the finishing blow, all for this 1-for-2 exchange. The doll-faced youth didn't seem to understand Hoshino's words. It was only when the slow-motion video was played that everyone noticed his movements. In fact, it was a momentary pause, as though he was waiting for a moment. As for Rao Rong, he was like an impenetrable wall. It seemed as though as long as he was around, the Japanese wouldn't be able to enter their jungler. It was just as they had said at the start. They allowed everyone to witness Supreme Alliance's double team. Even in front of the Japanese, they didn't seem inferior. Of course, it wasn't easy to win because the opponent was the Japanese. After the 1-for-2 exchange, the Japanese seemed to have figured out their strategy and quickly gained back a point. They had planned to end the battle quickly, but it dragged to the end. The match lasted for a full 40 minutes. Following that, the Japanese assumed that Lin Chintao was acting as bait again and didn't make any rash moves. Instead, they lost the best opportunity to attack. They seemed to be losing. After Yu Cixin finished speaking, he tugged on his jacket, revealing his battle uniform and his head of black hair. He stood up, his legs long and slender, the corners of his eyes arched. He was ravishing. Be it the media or the audience, they all noticed this scene. At this moment, the scene control also moved the camera to his side. It wasn't possible to see such a man in China. His silky black hair made him seem as though he had walked out of a manga. His black hair was so dark that the first thought that came to mind was that he wasn't to be trifled with. In reality, he was the most suitable person to be the big boss. It wasn't as though no one had lowered their guard against him after seeing his looks. They had wanted to kidnap him, but after that, they had attracted a nightmarish calamity. This was Yu Cixin. No one could tell just how strong he was. There were too many matches where he didn't even need to appear. Hoshino could handle it alone. But there were people who had seen his solo match. Not long ago, he had finished off his opponent in 5 minutes. He hadn't even fought in the jungler, he had relied on his positioning to show off. With such a powerful fighting style, he could even predict which path his opponent would take and what they would do. Someone had once said that going up against Yu Cixin in a match was a one-sided slaughter. In other words, a match without Yu Cixin wasn't a display of the Japanese's true strength. But there weren't many who could send him out. Hence, when they saw his actions, there was an uproar in the crowd. Is my almighty going up? Oh my God! Does that mean the Japanese will lose the double? But it hasn't ended yet. Is Supreme Alliance really that strong? Can they send Almighty Xian out? There were some who were doubtful. Especially those who hadn't thought of interviewing Supreme Alliance and had specially come to the Japanese. In their minds, Dongying was undoubtedly the purpose of their trip to Huaxia. They hadn't expected Yu Cixin to make such a move. But the double hadn't ended and it wasn't easy to make a conclusion. But this couldn't suppress their curiosity. Mei Lin, you've interacted with the Japanese before. What do you think Yu Cixin's actions mean? Mei Lin was the reporter who had said that they would learn a lot from the match between Supreme Alliance and the Japanese. She laughed lightly and shrugged. Ha, girls, don't make a fuss. Based on my understanding of UC Shin, he doesn't play by the rules. You should know how a genius is like. Sometimes, he stands up because he's bored and wants to compete. Supreme Alliance's performance was spectacular and beyond my expectations, but it isn't possible for him to stand up. Let's continue watching and wait for the double to end. You're right. Many people agreed with this statement. The shoutcaster wasn't able to provide an answer. But not long after he finished his sentence, the game's music blasted through his ears once more. KO. Lin Chintao successfully killed one of the players in the double 3 times. The situation was clear. As the troops closed in, the Japanese's crystal shattered into a shower of silver flowers. Supreme Alliance won this double fight. It was a beautiful victory. Lin Chintao paused for a moment, as if he couldn't believe it. Until the person next to him reached out again, took off his earphones, and chuckled softly. Are you stupid? Ah! We won. My almighty. We really won. Lin Chintao had always been a boy. He had been under pressure for too long and now, he was completely released. He pounced towards Rao Rong. Didn't you see my big move? It was so F***ing exciting. With this tempo, I'll be able to crush Xiao Sanpang the next time I see him. Xiao Sanpang. What's the meaning of this? F***ck, what's the meaning of this? Besides, did the two of you have to celebrate in such a manner in front of an audience? Supreme Alliance didn't think much of it. Yin Wuyao, the man of steel, could only see the victory of this match. Everyone was overjoyed. The foreign reporters were all dumbfounded. How could they win just like that? Indeed, it wasn't a sign in the eyes of ordinary people. But winning or losing was just a matter of tempo. Even Feng Shang stuttered as he told Lin Chintao, "Wayoyo, that was too cool." Yeah. Ha 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 ha. Lin Chintao was genuinely happy. Rao Rong watched him, his lips curving upwards. The more Bojio watched, the brighter her smile became. She seemed to have found out another secret. All right. Qin Mo stood up. His handsome face was immersed in the lights, like a sparkling diamond. He stood tall and handsome, a gust of wind blowing in, fluttering his uniform. The word Supreme Alliance floated in and his voice could be heard again. It's our turn now. Chapter 1362. In that instant, there seemed to be a strong gust of wind blowing over. It was probably due to his aura. The moment Qin Mo stood up, everyone from Supreme Alliance straightened. Everyone from Supreme Alliance straightened their backs. Their backs were straight. On the huge screen, they could only see the two words flying behind them. From now on, the finals will officially begin. Watch carefully. Xiao Sanpang tilted his head and glanced at his captain. His expression changed as well. Indeed, they had to watch carefully, regardless of the Japanese's or Supreme Alliance's style. The arrival of the team battle made everyone extremely excited. Especially when some of the female fans saw the originally gentle and lazy Hoshino bending over, removing his jacket. When he glanced up, his messy hair carried a seriousness that had never been seen before. Bojio smiled. When she walked over, her position was right in front of him. She stuffed one hand into her pocket as usual, but the warmth in her eyes couldn't be hidden. Hoshino looked at her and said gently, "Have you recovered?" Yesterday. Bojio didn't manage to finish her sentence. Before she could finish her sentence, Lin Feng covered her mouth. It was better to stop public displays of affection, it was such a serious occasion. Hoshino chuckled, finishing her sentence. Qin Mo took care of you yesterday. Bojo nodded, reaching out to push Lin Feng away. Lin Feng froze. What was going on? How did he know? Wait a minute, he seemed to have asked if Little Spade had recovered. Why was he so concerned about Little Spade? F***ck, if Little Spade was a guy, he wouldn't have such wild thoughts. The audience could tell that something was amiss. Although he couldn't hear their specific voices, the two of them seemed to be talking about something. It was as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other for many years and were reminiscing about the past. This Supreme Alliance and the Japanese were going to be rivals, right? The two vice-captains looked like a family. The atmosphere between the captains was the most normal. Even though they were seated so far away, they could also feel the powerful auras emanating from the two of them. Yu Cixin laughed, brushing past them. Your vice-captain seems to trust my vice-captain, aren't you worried? She's already mine. What's there to worry about? Qin Mo glanced over casually. If you are worried, you can make Hoshino yours. But it doesn't seem possible in this lifetime. Yu Ci's fingers paused and his eyes narrowed. Qin Mo listened to the host's arrangement for both parties to shake hands. He stretched out his hand. He was clearly going to shake hands, but because of his noble aura, it looked more like he was here to challenge the host. Please advise me. I will, Mr. Qin. The two of them did not have much sincerity in this handshake. The audience could see it. There was a barrage of comments on the internet. The organizers must be crazy to let these two shake hands. This is a serious competition. Let's be serious. Here's the dubbing. Yu Cixin, just watch, I'm going to crush you. Qin Mo, hee, come and try. Do you think I'm afraid of you? I'm asking you if you're right or not. It's very vivid. Grab a picture and make it into a sticker pack. What should we do? My husband and my boyfriend are fighting. Who should I help? My almighty Hoshino and Big Spade look like a CP. It's so cute. Facepalm. They are indeed the most harmonious vice-captains I've ever seen. Wait a minute, listen to my conjecture. Didn't someone say that almighty Hoshino didn't come out because he looked down on Supreme Alliance? But now, why do I feel like almighty Hoshino isn't looking down on Supreme Alliance? He wants to save his strength for the team battle because Supreme Alliance has almighty Qin and Big Spade. Isn't that the case? I need some time to calm down before I think about this. What if my Big Spade really has something going on with almighty Hoshino? Just as they were thinking about it, Qin Mo suddenly walked towards her. After shaking hands with Yu Cixin, Qin Mo suddenly walked towards her. He reached out, his voice calm but clear. I have something for you before the competition. What is it? There was a gift for a competition. Was it candy? Qin Mo arched a brow. Reach out. Bojo did as she was told, but she didn't know what the Almighty was going to give her. Qin Mo held onto her hand, a smile in his voice. Me, do you want it? Everyone, he paused for just half a second. The entire arena was in an uproar. The committee was verifying the list of participants. When they heard the commotion, they glanced at each other. Even though it was a live stream, such a scene wouldn't be broadcasted online. The countless reporters present wanted to capture this scene. But it was too late. Lin Feng was standing at the side, his expression obvious. He didn't want to let Little Spade flaunt their love, but his captain came out with such an explosive response. Such a confession. The girls in the arena were in a frenzy. Big Spade, take my almighty Qin. What a demon, my nose almost bled when almighty Qin smiled just now. Me, do you want it? Ah! I'm going crazy. Bojo was going crazy too. This was clearly against the rules. In such a public setting, She couldn't push him to the corner and kiss him. Her heart was itching. She couldn't control the smile on her face. Just as she was about to speak, the person leaned forward. If you don't want it, we can talk tonight about how many people you have confessed to. Bojo was serious. Can I not return it after I take it? Sure. Chin Mo smiled again. Ah! Bojo exclaimed, her tone slow and sinister. We can't be relatives and we have a competition later. I can't do anything bad to you. Brother Mo, did you do it on purpose? Chin Mo did it on purpose. But it wasn't to prevent her from doing bad things. Forget it. Anyway, she had always been slow in certain aspects. I did it on purpose. Chin Mo glanced over and put on the youngster's wrist guard. Let's go, I'll give you a present after the competition. There's another one. Bojo thought about how this present was enough to make her happy for the rest of her life. What else could he give her? When little Princess Chin was young, she would never have imagined that he would give it to her personally when he grew up. At that time, she had spent so much money but he hadn't been willing to buy it. What goes around comes around. Now, the good fortune was on her side. Bojo smiled wickedly. But she didn't know that Chin Mo's gaze towards her had a deeper meaning. Hoshino watched the entire process and lowered his gaze. He had wanted to make Chin Mo jealous. He had achieved his goal. But that person was really daring. He confessed under such circumstances. Wasn't he afraid that people would say that he was putting on a show after Supreme Alliance lost? What did you say to Z just now? You see, Shin tilted his head. Hoshino tugged on the wrist guard. I was concerned about her body. Do you think Chin Mo's memory has recovered? I can't tell. Yu Cixin smiled. His words today aren't like what he usually says. Hey. Hoshino arched a brow. Why? Don't go easy on her. Yu Cixin's gaze was deep. Hoshino smiled faintly. I'm the same as you. I've been waiting for this competition for a long time. It's fun to play against Z, but I didn't have the chance previously. Alright, it's starting. He seemed to be responding to Hoshino's words. With a swoosh, the contestants were confirmed. The MC picked up the microphone. The 2018 Asian Esports Grand Final, the last team battle, officially begins. Swoosh, there was another sound. The camera panned down. The audience watched as the contestants sat in front of their computers. Chin Mo sat in the middle. It was always the same during the team battle. The captain sat in the middle, making it easier for him to command. Coco, Bojo, Yunhu, and Lin Feng, the four of them sat in a row. Their long fingers landed on the keyboard at the same time. The crisp sound reverberated in the arena. To prevent the boring scene from lasting for less than a minute, the shoutcaster said, the most anticipated match is finally here. Just now, I saw a netizen saying that Hoshino didn't appear in the previous match because of Spade Z. What do you think of the credibility of this statement? It's hard to say. After all, from their interaction just now, they seem to know each other. Moreover, I've only seen Yu Cixin and Hoshino competing at the same time in international competitions. After listening to the commentary, Mei Lin held onto the microphone and started to express her opinion. Mei Lin held the microphone and started to express her opinion. I'm not sure if the shoutcasters have been led astray by the atmosphere in the stadium, but the disparity in strength between the two teams is too great. Yu Cixin and Hoshino are fighting at the same time, but that's only because they've always treated the competition seriously and wouldn't get carried away. Since it's the last match, they have to win beautifully. We'll be showing the live stream of the match later, mainly focusing on the Japanese. Under normal circumstances, we would believe whatever information we received. Hence, even the overseas esports fans felt that the shoutcasters weren't professional enough. Most of them wanted to see the Japanese Supreme Alliance wasn't bad. But now, Yusishin and Hoshino were competing. It seemed like they weren't aware of what that meant. They couldn't possibly assume that they were a match for Yusishin and Hoshino just because they won the double match. The comments from overseas started to increase. Most of them were talking about Supreme Alliance's shortcomings. They finally found a chance to criticize them. The keyboard warriors on the internet jumped out again. These people had a common trait. They were very saintly, covering up for all crimes and feeling that they were in the right. I've watched Supreme Alliance's competition. Isn't it just like that? There are so many dramas, there aren't so many emotions. In the past, no one dared to speak up. Some people should really see what the foreign media is saying. If they have the time, they should practice their skills. Anyway, I don't like Supreme Alliance and I can't stand watching their competition. Me too, my almighty just copied an article and didn't do anything wrong. Yet, they insisted on supporting the original work. Serves them right for being so nosy. The two above are really interesting. Do they believe whatever the foreign media says? Besides, opposing copyright infringement isn't nosy. It's simple, they have a conscience but you don't. Of course, I don't expect you to have a conscience. Hehe, another fan is speaking up for Supreme Alliance. They've been slapped in the face by the foreign media yet they're still enjoying themselves. No wonder the foreigners don't like Supreme Alliance so much. Don't embarrass them. Right at this moment. The most famous director in the world suddenly uploaded a video on the internet. The video was very short, about a minute or so. I heard that this person is competing today. He's sending a computer expert that no one can match up to. This is the promotional video for this movie. One had to know how influential such a famous director was. It wasn't just in one country, it was in several continents. People clicked on the video. What came into view was a silver-haired youngster with a huge black mask on his face and a black jacket. He sat in front of the computer, his fingers moving up. The speed of his fingers was so fast that it was dazzling. He looked up casually. After conquering a system, he took off one side of his mask and played with the silver lighter with his fingertips. His handsome face slowly broke into a smile. At the bottom of the screen was a line of words. Standing in the darkness to protect the light. I am Z. Suddenly, the entire internet was about to collapse. Perhaps in China, not many people knew what this movie meant. But overseas, many movie fans knew who the director was based on to film this movie. Z, the hacker king with magical colors. It was hard to describe because of the different fields. But anyone who knew about code would know who it was. And the person who played Z was actually in Supreme Alliance. The foreign netizens blew up. No, it wasn't just the netizens. Anyone who knew anything about it could search for it and find out how to watch the competition. The comments from the foreigners came one after another. It was like a slap to the faces of those who said, foreigners don't like Supreme Alliance. I'm here for Z. Is my almighty called Spade Z now? What a cute nickname, it's very appropriate for Asians to be reserved. Hey, bro, I'm an old fan. Let me tell you something. Z is a girl. What? That's right. Oh no. Cool. Is that all the resources? Why aren't they reporting it? What about the Chinese media? Because the external network was flooded. There were too many people who wanted to watch Supreme Alliance's upcoming competition. The supervisor immediately made an overseas call to Mei Lin. From now on, place more cameras on Supreme Alliance. Why? Mei Lin felt that the suggestion was ridiculous. Sir, you should know how many people are waiting to see the Japanese. I don't see any value in separating the cameras to a new team like Supreme Alliance. Mei Lin, I know you like the Japanese and so do I. But most of the time, we have to stand in the middle. Even if there is a deviation, it can't be too much. According to the time difference, the finals should have started. Do your report properly. Chapter 1363. Work hard on your report. Mei Lin wasn't happy with Mr. Smith's last sentence, but she didn't think she was biased. Of course, the Japanese were more important compared to Supreme Alliance. A report was a report. She wanted to see what was more interesting about Supreme Alliance than the Japanese. Mei Lin held a small piece of equipment in her hands, aiming it at the seated person. This was something only the media could bring in. The image was clear. The competition had indeed started. The players from both teams chose their own in-game characters. Qi Nemo was the assassin while Bojiu chose the ambusher. Supreme Alliance's formation isn't easy, it's too fragile. The shoutcaster made a simple analysis based on the game character. It would be better to choose a tank. You have to be tanky to deal with the Japanese. Based on previous competitions, this is the only way to deal with them. Spade Z is starting to move. Almost everyone present knew her creed. The enemy's wilderness, my home. Is she going to steal the blue buff? She can't. Indeed, she couldn't. From the screen, the audience could clearly see the Japanese's middle lane and Hoshino trapping Bojiu in the middle, one in front and one behind. It was as though they were prepared for a counterattack. Hoshino didn't show any mercy, and the damage landed directly on her body. Spade Z's HP was dropping bit by bit. Even her movements were slowing down. She was about to be surrounded. At this moment, she lifted her rifle upwards, jumping out of the encirclement and onto the riverside. It was a close shave. The fans heaved a sigh of relief. Some of the audience saw the drawbacks. Playing the game like this is too reckless. You might even lose your first kill. I've mentioned before that Spade Z was born in the wilderness and hasn't gone through proper training. It isn't possible for her to compete in a professional match for long periods of time. After all, professional matches are about teamwork. Just watch, this weakness will be magnified when she meets the Japanese. The Japanese won't allow her to snatch any beasts and Hoshino won't allow her to do as she pleases in their wilderness. Isn't that too absolute? After all, Spade Z didn't make any major mistakes. It's true that she didn't make any mistakes, but look at her current economy. It's the lowest in the entire arena. Those who have watched her play should know that no matter what, her economy is always the highest. Only when her economy is high can she deal damage. It's been more than a minute since the start of the match. Under normal circumstances, she should have gotten up by now. If she hasn't gotten up, it can only mean that she's being suppressed by Hoshino. It seemed that it wasn't just the regular spectators who noticed this. Even the director directed the camera towards her face. She was clean and handsome. Her silver hair fell down and covered her eyes. From this angle, he could only see her lower jaw. It seems like Spade Z is in a passive position. The commentator said, she used to lead the pace, but now she's completely suppressed by Hoshino. She can't even lead the pace. I can't see her expression from this position, but she should be anxious. Indeed, if she doesn't catch up, she won't be able to fight in the later stages of the match. The Japanese are as stable as ever. It isn't just stable, look at Hoshino's movement, it's too fast. If I were Spade Z, I would raise my economy first since it's too difficult to snatch anything from Hoshino's hands. It's too much of a waste of time. 4 minutes into the match. Even the regular spectators could see something. After all, the first kill they had been waiting for didn't happen. Instead, Spade Z was being suppressed. Mei Lin stood outside the arena, holding onto her equipment and occasionally giving a few explanations. She laughed lightly when she saw this. Actually, Supreme Alliance's newcomer king isn't clear about the situation. She isn't bad and should be famous in China, but against Hoshino, she won't be able to use her previous playstyle. We can see that even though there isn't a single drop of HP, it's obvious that Supreme Alliance isn't in a good position. The Japanese's playstyle will seep in bit by bit, and by the time they realize it, it'll be too late because the Japanese will be controlling the pace. As Spade Z was suppressed, the atmosphere in the crowd gradually turned heavy. It wasn't normal. Zhao Sanpang couldn't sit still because he could tell that little Spade was having a hard time. Once again, Bojio held onto her long spear, gliding past the wilderness. Her speed was as fast as ever. She was like the wind. Why did she go there again? The spectators shook their heads. Xiao Jing was the only one who didn't speak. He sat there with a frown. From the map, the Japanese made a prediction based on Spade Z's actions. This time, the sorcerer in the middle lane hid in front of the bushes, intending to ambush Spade Z. When the fans saw this, their breaths tightened. They didn't even dare to look at the figure approaching the bushes. The people from the Japanese side were moving towards them one by one. They seemed to be forming a huge encirclement. I'm afraid the first drop of HP is going to be Supreme Alliance. The shoutcasters sounded regretful. After all, in a team battle, the first drop of HP was very important. Spade Z, the FC King, was so popular because of this reason. But now, the FC King was going to be killed by the opponent. Mei Lin shook her head. I said it from the start, the difference between the two teams is too big. The foreigners felt an indescribable feeling. After all, from the promotional video, the youngster seemed to be Z's reincarnation. As expected, they couldn't trust what was produced in the movie. The movie had been edited, so it was definitely just for show. It wasn't difficult to portray an ordinary person as a computer expert in the movie. They weren't disappointed, just a little regretful. After all, they weren't esports fans. They just wanted to see how talented the youngster was in computer science. But even a hacker might not be able to become a professional gamer. But they were more sensitive to bugs in the game than ordinary people. Moreover, their operation and hand speed were much faster. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be so boring. The foreigners lost interest and were about to close the external video report. At this moment, the silhouette on the screen suddenly paused, turned around, and jumped backwards. She didn't rush forward. Instead, she retreated to her own wilderness. The three ambushers from the Japanese paused. Right at this moment, a line of words appeared on the screen. The Tyrant King had been killed by Supreme Alliance. The entire team's finances had doubled. Tyrant King. The audience looked up abruptly. When did they kill the Tyrant King? Why didn't they notice it at all? It wasn't that they didn't notice it. Spade Z moved too much. Not only was the camera following her, but the Japanese's attention was also focused on her. Hoshino and Yusishin were different. When he sensed something was wrong, he had already enlarged the map and was prepared to rush towards the Tyrant King. But it was too late. After Qin Mo killed the Tyrant King, he returned the skill to its original form. As his sword flashed, he took down one of the opponent's small wild monsters. The audience couldn't keep up with the rhythm of the scene. The director immediately shifted the camera, placing his tracking gaze on Qin Mo. Wait a minute, look at the finances. I saw it, there isn't any change, it's still the lowest. It isn't Big Spade's finances, it's Almighty Qin's finances. F***CK. So much. It isn't just that, it definitely isn't that. The Supreme Alliance's fans, who were familiar with them, suddenly narrowed their eyes, trying to figure out what they hadn't thought of. Hoshino was one step ahead and typed a line of words on the public chat. You have been restraining me from the start so that Chin Mo can develop faster. I really can't let my guard down when it comes to you. Was Spadesy restraining Hoshino? How was that possible? It wasn't just the Japanese fans who felt that it didn't make sense. Even Melinda's eyes were widened. But when the camera panned to the youngster's face, she smiled, her right hand moving the mouse. Her right hand changed something and she typed blindly with one hand. Thanks for letting me win. The audience shifted their attention to the screen. The youngster's character was buffing with red buffs. She didn't take any damage. How could she type with her free hand? But from the looks of it, she admitted that her actions weren't to snatch the opponent's wild beasts, but to restrain the Japanese's mid-beasts so that Chin Mo could develop faster. But it wasn't worth it. Even if Supreme Alliance got the Tyrant King, her finances doubled. F***CK, so this is the deep water pit. Once her finances doubled, Spadesy wouldn't be the lowest in the game. That wasn't all. She didn't know where she got her money from. Her finances were growing visibly. There's actually such a playstyle. The shoutcasters were in disbelief. Not developing in the early stage and catching up in the late stage. Another shoutcaster added, strictly speaking, this isn't the late stage, it's the early stage. It's only been 5 minutes since the start of the game. We probably thought that the disparity in strength between the two teams would be too great and the outcome would be decided in a short period of time. But from the looks of it, that isn't the case. The biggest difference between Supreme Alliance's playstyle and the usual playstyle is that the mid-beasts and the jungler would interact with each other from afar. They might not seem to be supporting each other, but they are restraining each other. For example, Spadesy's positioning just now, she could have walked through the bushes to hide her tracks. As a FC King, she wouldn't be so clueless. I'm sure you're in the same state as me, wondering why they were moving in such a way since it would be easy for the Japanese to predict their movements. But after Chin Mo killed the Tyrant King, I finally understood why she was moving in such a manner. She used herself as bait to attract the Japanese's attention. It was a beautiful diversion. Mei Lin listened to the shoutcaster, feeling that it was nonsense. How could two players be able to work together from the east and west ends of the map? It should be a coincidence. Mei Lin held onto the microphone, smiling at the equipment. It seems like Supreme Alliance's luck isn't bad today. After all, they are competing in their own country. But I believe the same method won't work twice. Indeed. Even the shoutcaster noticed the problem. It is worth mentioning that the moment Spade was about to stop, Hoshino and Yusishin had already headed towards the Tyrant King. This means that the method didn't manage to confuse the Japanese. Chin Mo was able to successfully kill the Tyrant King due to luck. This time, the Japanese are probably going to show their might. The moment the shoutcaster finished his sentence, the two players who didn't manage to snatch the Tyrant King headed toward Supreme Alliance's wilderness. They took away the blue buff from Supreme Alliance's wilderness in a few moves. Coco glanced at the map. His first reaction was to head over. But to his surprise, the moment he took a step forward, another person appeared on the other side. It was Yusishin's command to gather and attack. Coco was trapped in the middle. With such a distance, everyone was far away. Supreme Alliance's middle lane is in danger. The moment this thought flashed through everyone's mind, a heart-shaking sound effect rang in his ears. KO. The first drop of blood. It landed on Yusishin's body. On the other hand, Coco fell back to the ground. He had indeed returned to the bottom of the tower, but Hoshino's last hit was too timely. The speed reduction effect caused him to die under Yucixin's knife even after he returned to the defense tower. First kill. First kill. The fans at the venue were all exclaiming. That's insane. F***ck, what kind of positioning was that? He managed to hit it even after returning to the tower. Almighty 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 is finally awake, he's not sleeping anymore. Who can resist such amazing coordination? Supreme Alliance is in trouble. They had indeed taken down the Tyrant King, but they had lost a head. That was a loss. Bojo deleted the word she had typed and continued heading towards the bottom lane. She was aiming for the creeps on the way. Coco wanted to say something, but Chinemo was one step ahead. Of him. I don't think you need my guidance. Coco stilled. Help me defend the middle lane, Chinemo said, holding his long sword as he dashed forward. Remember, the competition has just begun. Coco remained silent. The shoutcaster gave the most professional evaluation. The Japanese have found a breakthrough for Supreme Alliance. You mean Coco in the middle lane? Chapter 1364. The shoutcaster was right. If the middle lane was lost, this game was going to be very difficult to play. What kind of team was the Japanese? They had precise calculations and excellent battle strategies. They would grab onto any loopholes, and that was the hardest part of the Japanese to deal with. If they didn't increase their energy when fighting against such a team, it would be easy for them to collapse. Supreme Alliance's strategy to deal with this crisis is extremely important. They will probably send someone to the middle lane. If that's the case, then the Japanese will really be the one leading the rhythm. But if they don't go, the middle lane will be lost and the situation will worsen. Actually, the most crucial part of the assault was the coordination between Hoshino and Yucixin. If Supreme Alliance can't find a way to break their coordination, it won't be easy for them to win either lane. Supreme Alliance is starting to make adjustments. Wait a minute, they didn't make any adjustments. The shoutcaster watched Yun Hu's movements on the screen, narrowing his eyes. They probably wanted to make adjustments but received instructions to return to their original positions. What about the middle lane? The other shoutcaster frowned. After all, with such a huge problem, if Supreme Alliance didn't make any adjustments, they would always be in a passive state of being suppressed. Supreme Alliance probably hasn't thought of a good idea either. The shoutcaster glanced over at Chinemo. The captains are in charge of commanding the battle. Up until now, the Japanese didn't require any leadership. Supreme Alliance, on the other hand, has been facing too many problems. That's right, but I'm not sure what state Chinemo is in right now. I wonder if he's able to predict everything with his amnesia like he did in the past. What we can be sure of is that we are only witnessing 30% of the Japanese's and Yucixin's abilities. You can imagine how frightening their teamwork will be in the later stages of the competition. Will Chinemo be able to handle them? The shoutcaster's words were what the fans were worried about. Big Spade and Almighty Chin's long-range coordination had been spectacular. But the next second, the Japanese had taken ahead. Besides, the same method couldn't be used twice because both Yucixin and Hoshino had already guessed their plan. The Japanese were too strong. He was so strong that Lin Feng and Yun Hu hadn't left his attack range. This was also another manifestation of suppression. Even under such circumstances, the strategy hadn't changed. The shoutcaster's first thought was that there was a problem with the commander. It seems like Chinemo isn't suitable for such a large-scale competition. After all, up until now, he had become very conforming and was not like his past self at all. The shoutcaster turned towards the big screen. The director gave a close-up shot of the white figure that was still fighting the beasts in the wilderness. That was Chinemo's in-game character, his clothes fluttering in the wind, his long sword in hand. The speed of the jungler surprised the shoutcasters. It was not easy to have such a fast hand speed after amnesia. But this match wasn't about hand speed. It was about whose prediction was more accurate and who made fewer mistakes. I've never seen Supreme Alliance play in such a manner. This sentence was said by a fan sitting in the audience. I feel like I'm completely suppressed. Yes, it wasn't just Coco. Lin Feng, Yunhu, and even Qin Mo and Bo Jiu gave off such a feeling. When Qin Mo was fighting in the wilderness, they would intentionally harass him. Firstly, it was to prevent him from developing, and secondly, it was to catch him whenever possible. Xiao Sanpang frowned. Why didn't I think of using this method against Qin Mo in the past? Xiao Jing remained silent, his gaze deepening as he watched the screen. Mei Lin made use of the gap to turn the microphone. We can see that the competition has been going on for almost 10 minutes and the Japanese are still in the upper hand. However, they aren't satisfied, continuing to press forward with their usual style. Even Supreme Alliance's jungler assassin seems to be suppressed. Wait a minute. Mei Lin seemed to have seen something. She paused abruptly, as though she had expected it. It seems like Supreme Alliance is going to sacrifice the second drop of blood soon. The moment she finished her sentence, the Japanese's tank appeared beside Qin Mo. The Japanese's tank walked over to Qin Mo, who was using the blue buff. He sent a signal to the sorcerer hiding in the bushes. Qin Mo was already retreating, but the Japanese's big move had a locking function. Qin Mo was already retreating, but the person's big move had a locking function. In an instant, Qin Mo's HP dropped significantly. The sorcerer from the Japanese immediately activated his freezing skill. He wanted to use this time to trap Qin Mo. Everyone who played the assassin class knew that the most terrifying thing was to be controlled. Once they were controlled, they wouldn't be able to move at all. That would be the end of them. Almighty Qin is probably going to fall at his own doorstep. He was too careless, he knew the other party would rebel. The support from his teammates wasn't in place. But Almighty Qin didn't even send a signal. Did he forget how to command? Xiao Sanpang gritted his teeth, he seemed really anxious. At this moment, Xiao Jing spoke. The Japanese made a mistake. What? Xiao Sanpang's words had just come out. On the screen, the freezing skill didn't freeze Qin Mo. It wasn't because of the sorcerer's actions. But in that instant, Qin Mo teleported with one skill and jumped back to his original position. And that original position, it was where the sorcerer was standing. Under the camera, the Japanese sorcerer's eyes widened. He had already used his flash skill when he was about to attack. Now he couldn't dodge it even if he wanted to. First, he was slowed down by the sword formation. Then, there were 3 swoosh 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 swoosh. Silver-white light flashed. In just an instant, he was severely injured. When everyone saw this scene, their eyes were filled with joy for the first time since the team battle. Qin Mo held the mouse with one hand, his index finger clicking quickly and crisply. From that handsome face, it was impossible to tell that he was chasing after someone. Instead, his slender and fair fingers seemed to have a sense of asceticism when they moved up and down. Xiao Jing finished his sentence. Even if Qin Mo lost his memory, the Japanese shouldn't have sent just 2 people to kill him, it would have been easy for them to fail. Are you saying that the sorcerer from the Japanese will die? That shouldn't be the case. The tank has already returned to restrain Qin Mo. He can't chase forward anymore. The sorcerer has also left Qin Mo's attack range. Next, he just has to. Xiao Sanpang wasn't finished. A figure suddenly appeared on the map. She was extremely fast. It was as though the wall in front of her couldn't stop her. She moved up twice and appeared beside the sorcerer. She could still vaguely see the mark in the air. Before anyone could react, she moved her rifle from her back. 2 words appeared on the screen, K.O. When the audience saw this, they froze for a second. Then, they were filled with shock. No one knew how Spade Z appeared. The audience only knew one thing. This was Supreme Alliance's first kill. The score was pulled back to a draw. The tank that came with the sorcerer could only run to the center of the defense tower. He glanced at his captain's words again. Just harass, don't attack. He admitted his mistake. It's my fault. After which, he added in annoyance. I thought he didn't notice me. You see, Sheen cleared half of Supreme Alliance's wilderness and smiled. Do you think Sheen Mo will be easy to deal with after losing his memory? I told you not to have such thoughts. But it isn't a loss. Hoshino and I have cleared most of their wilderness. The beasts in the wilderness represented money. That wasn't all, the red and blue buffs had speed reduction effects. Assassins used up a lot of mana. Now that Supreme Alliance's wilderness didn't have these things, it meant that Sheen Mo would be left behind. However, it was proven. It wasn't that simple. Because the Japanese's wilderness had been cleared as well. What's going on? The dull-faced Japanese was confused. The audience was even more confused as to what had happened. The director seemed to understand what everyone wanted to see. He immediately enlarged the other half of the map that Hoshino and Yusishin had seen when they had cleared the Japanese's wilderness. After killing the Japanese sorcerer, Spade Z hadn't returned. Instead, she had headed straight for the Japanese's wilderness. However, there was one person who was one step faster than her. That was Sheen Mo. The 2 of them seemed to have guessed that they wouldn't be able to hold on to their red wilderness. Besides, there wasn't a need to chase after the tank. It was a waste of time and they wouldn't be able to kill him. The Japanese's tank had always thought that he had escaped quickly. Hence, he had only seen their shadows at the start. Then, he hadn't seen them. He should have taken a look at this angle. Once he did, he would understand that Sheen Mo and Bojio's target hadn't been him from the start. Instead, it had been the wilderness on the other side of the wall on his right. The 2 of them had great teamwork. Everywhere they went, there wasn't a single blade of grass left. Even the line of soldiers had been cut off. They watched as the 2 figures flew past. Merlin, who was reporting, paused for a moment. It was too fast. No. That wasn't right. It wasn't just fast. Be it their positioning, judgment, or when they had been clearing the wilderness. The 2 figures were slender and reckless. They didn't seem to know what fear was. Weren't they afraid? They were going up against the Japanese. Besides, even if they managed to turn the score around, they had been suppressed the entire time. Chapter 1365. Mei Lin couldn't figure it out. But the shoutcasters could see it clearly. It seems like compared to Yusishin and Hoshino's teamwork, Sheen Mo and Spade Z's teamwork is the highlight of this match. You mean to say that these 2 pairs are equally matched? No, there is a difference. Take a look at Supreme Alliance's bottom lane and you will understand. After the shoutcaster's words, everyone focused their attention on the bottom lane. When did Hoshino come here? It wasn't just Hoshino, Yusishin was here too. Were they sure that their wild zones were gone? If not, they should be clearing the troops in the jungle. But they suddenly appeared at the bottom lane at the speed of light. Without any hesitation, he used attack rush and dealt damage to Lin Feng, who was still clearing the creeps. Yun who wanted to go forward to help. But the next moment, Yusishin marked the damage. Lin Feng was rooted to the ground. He didn't have any time to retaliate. He held the keyboard in his right hand while his left hand moved up and down. He wanted to use his positioning to avoid the opponent's attack. Lin Feng did it and Yun Hu went forward to block the attack for him. He thought he could leave after entering the tower, but the Japanese's troops attacked at this moment. Moreover, the opponent's long-range attacker was there too. Hoshino didn't hesitate. He held the crescent-long knife and leaped into the tower. The knife light fell, sucking in and retracting, causing Lin Feng's HP to drop. Then he slashed again. At the same time, he leaped out of the defense tower's attack range. The silver light could be seen clearly on the screen. No one would have guessed that Hoshino was the one who had such a sharp positioning and attack. After all, his aura was there. But the fans who were familiar with him weren't surprised. Even before the game's sound effect came, they already knew the outcome. They shouted loudly, "Almighty Hoshino, you are finally awake." The origin of this sentence was quite a story. Hoshino loved to sleep. He looked gentle, but in reality, he was caught sleeping in the resting area 3 times before the match. But the moment he entered the arena, everything changed. Of course, if it was a very ordinary team. Their star god's playstyle was just like a human's, gentle like the spring moon dripping on the windowsill. But if the other party was also very powerful, then, he would change his usual playstyle. He would be like a knight who had just woken up from a dream. Wherever he went, there would be the splendor of the moonlight. Just like the game character he used, he had a nickname, Continuous Combo, Queen of the Moon. As if responding to the shouts of the fans. The score on the screen immediately changed. 2:1, Lin Feng's character lay on the ground, covered in blood. The Japanese took the lead again. More importantly, it wasn't over yet. The defense tower at Supreme Alliance's bottom lane was about to be breached. Yun Hu wouldn't be able to withstand the attacks from the 3 of them. "We can only retreat." The shoutcaster looked at this scene and said what was on his mind. Indeed, Yun Hu retreated because if he stayed there any longer, he might be taken away as well. The sound of the defense tower shattering came from the screen. The 2 shoutcasters glanced at each other. "We thought the Japanese wouldn't let go of the middle lane, but it seems like our guess wasn't accurate." "That's right, regardless of which lane it is, as long as there is a possibility of an attack, they will take it down. The Japanese can't use a fixed mindset to judge this team. This time, Supreme Alliance is in trouble. The bottom lane looks like it's going to collapse and Supreme Alliance isn't doing well at the minions." That was indeed the case. The bottom lane had always been filled with the Japanese's minions and with long-range attackers. The speed at which they attacked the defense tower would definitely be much faster. Ever since the start of the competition, I'm starting to feel that the victory of a team isn't just related to their skills, it's also closely related to their leadership. Qin Mo might not have made any major mistakes in his maneuvering, but from what I've seen so far, his leadership skills haven't been fully displayed. And it isn't hard to tell that Supreme Alliance is starting to crumble. The sorcerer in the middle lane doesn't dare to advance, which means that they are aware of the danger the moment they leave the tower. Coco's technique is second to none in the country. This kind of cautious maneuver is a reflection of his mentality. He can't afford to be killed again, so he's carefully testing his position. This isn't a good thing. The more he does this, the more likely he'll be ambushed. The shoutcaster finished his sentence. Other than the sorcerer from the Japanese side, the tank that was left with half a tank of HP walked over. But the tank walked through the bushes. It could only be seen from the perspective of the Japanese. This meant that Coco probably didn't realize that there were 2 of them. One of them was a tank with a stun skill. This meant that he would be in danger the moment he left the tower. But he didn't seem to notice it. He watched as the sorcerer made a mistake and grasped the opportunity to advance. It's a trap. I can understand why Coco wanted to catch up to them when he saw their mistake, but it's obvious that the Japanese sorcerer made a mistake on purpose. After all, how could such a low-level maneuver appear on a team like the Japanese? They were just trying to lure Coco into a trap. As though to verify the words of the high-end players, the Japanese's flustered sorcerer steadied his legs and threw a freezing skill on Coco. At this moment, the Japanese's tank jumped out from the bushes, intending to stun Coco. What no one expected was that the moment he jumped out, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Another figure leaped out from the bushes. Dressed in snow-white robes, he held a long sword in his hand, leaving a silver glow in his wake. With a slash of the long sword, a sword formation rose. Both the Japanese's tank and sorcerer were slowed down by the sword formation. Even though the Japanese were prepared, they weren't able to dodge this move. It was too fast. It was so fast that no one could react. But the Japanese weren't weak either. After sensing the intrusion, the Japanese's sorcerer moved nimbly to avoid Qin Mo's next attack. But to his surprise, Qin Mo wasn't attacking him. Instead, he swung his long sword. With 3 swishing sounds, each ray of silver light landed on the Japanese's tank. This was a move that no one had expected. But it was this move. It didn't just prevent Qin Mo's big move from missing. It also gave Coco the chance to cooperate with him and take one of the Japanese's heads. 2:2. The score was pulled back to a tie. There was another sound effect in the game. A defense tower on the top lane of the Japanese was destroyed. The one who destroyed the tower was none other than Spade Z, who couldn't pinpoint her whereabouts. Mei Lin watched the match. Should she say that the ignorant were fearless? Let's put it this way. For every head the Japanese took, Supreme Alliance had to return with a head. It was the same even when they pushed the tower. But in this way, they would always be one step behind the Japanese. Mei Lin shook her head, her words filled with sincerity. They are always behind the Japanese to retaliate and are still being led by the Japanese. I hope Supreme Alliance will wake up soon. However, the match is still a little unexpected. According to the following situation, it will be difficult for Supreme Alliance to retaliate. Those who understand the competition should know that even though the teams have the same number of players, Supreme Alliance is clearly weaker in terms of the minions. Moreover, Supreme Alliance's long-range attackers have already died once. The Japanese's attackers are all online and they can take down the tower much faster than Supreme Alliance. That was true. Mei Lin's analysis coincided with what the shoutcaster was going to explain. But since Spade Z was above, Hoshino, who was lying in ambush at the bottom lane, had no choice but to turn and head towards his own jungle. Because of his understanding of Z. After taking down their tower. Since she wasn't leading the minions, she was definitely going to kill their jungle. He knew very well how Z carried out the sentence, "Your wilderness is my home," to the end. But some of the audience didn't understand why Hoshino didn't clear the minions. Instead, he headed towards the jungle. When the map of the jungle was zoomed in, the audience finally saw it clearly. Spade Z was clearing the second wave of the Japanese's jungle. The director pulled the camera back to Hoshino. He moved swiftly, the machete in his hand as though it was overflowing with moonlight. He could make it in time. Not only could he make it in time, but he could also trap Spade Z in the jungle. Based on the time, Spade Z should be at half HP by now. However, the next second, the audience fell silent. The red buff was still in effect, but that person was nowhere to be seen. Hoshino held the machete in one hand, walking around the jungle, the blade slicing through the bushes beside the red buff. Speaking of which, this was the first time Hoshino was facing Spade Z alone. Everyone in the audience held their breath. They were guessing the outcome of this battle. Time seemed to be stretched. But it hadn't even been 2 seconds. On the screen, Hoshino suddenly moved. His blade didn't touch the bushes beside the red buff, instead, he skimmed towards the river. He managed to find me even though I hid like that. Bojio curved her thin lips and leaped to the left. It seems like it's difficult to deal with someone who knows me so well. Hoshino smiled, the sharp blade in his hand and the loving smile on his face forming a stark contrast. I didn't notice it at the start because it's you, I had to think twice. The audience had never seen such a battle. How could they still have the mood to chat at such a crucial moment? Besides, they were clearly enemies. Why do I feel like there's an invisible warm atmosphere around me? But it couldn't be called warm. Chapter 1366. It was on the big screen. The audience watched as the machete was about to hit Bojio. They held their breaths. However, at this moment, Bojio flicked her long spear back. She was one step ahead of Hoshino and returned to her original position. Her speed was so fast that everyone froze. Hoshino's machete missed. This was something that had never happened before. Their battle wasn't over. After Bojio dodged the attack, she didn't have any intention of leaving. She swept her long spear and leaped over. The damage was off the charts. Hoshino moved his mouse and dodged to the right, returning with a machete. Whether it was his positioning or speed, he had amazed the crowd time and time again. Because the two people are too fast. The screen was left with the silver sparks from the collision of the machete and the long spear. Looking at that face, it was handsome in a different style. The camera zoomed in. Hoshino's fingers were moving so fast that it was almost an afterimage. Almost all the shoutcasters froze for a moment as they watched. 3 seconds later, they remembered that they were supposed to explain. But even though they remembered, they were still in a dilemma as to how to explain it. Because the moment one movement was over, another movement followed. They had to slow down the video to explain. It hadn't even been 20 seconds. The movements and positioning of those two players were much more detailed than their explanations of an ordinary team battle. Moreover, there were many skillful movements that the audience wouldn't be able to understand. There were too many things. Even after watching this battle, they wanted to exclaim, that movement was so cool. So there was such a thought behind it. The high-level players who were watching the live stream saw this scene and muttered to themselves, they've been predicting the entire time, and it's God-level prediction. These two people are a little too scary. Precise positioning meant that you were able to predict where your opponent's attacks would land. That wasn't all. At this moment, they thought they would see a half HP Spade Z. But unexpectedly, she had a blood-sucking equipment. She could use the damage from the beasts to recover her HP. This meant that even if the skill didn't hit Hoshino, it wouldn't miss. You're as smart as ever. Hoshino's tone was gentle. It didn't seem like a battle at all. The female fans could really use these words to create a 10,000-word story. Every chapter was about love. The two people in the duel were really too handsome. He couldn't even bear to move the camera away. However, this battle was destined to not last long. 25 seconds seemed to be the limit of the Almighty's patience. Chin Mo's eyes deepened as he followed. Hoshino also saw the figure on the map. He sheathed his machete and took a step back. He hid in the bushes but did not leave. Seeing this, a light flashed across Xiao Jing's eyes. It's starting. What? Xiao Sanpang was still dizzy. In reality, only those who understood the exchange between Hoshino and Bojio would be confused. Ordinary players, on the other hand, could only see his speed. For a professional like Xiao Sanpang, he had seen a lot of things. In the past 20 seconds, his eyes were about to drip by drops. How did the two of them do it? It was fine if there was a non-human. Why were there so many non-humans? Most importantly, both of their faces were better looking than his. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.